Chapter 126. What was above the clouds? In the legends of humanity's oldest religions, that was the realm of the true gods, the final resting place of mortals. Above the clouds was the kingdom of the gods, and the gods were always watching over you. Mom, the reverend priest, said that the gods are watching over us from above the clouds. But there are so many people below. Can they see all of us? If they could, wouldn't their entire body be covered with eyes? That would be so scary. In a public square, a brat who was straightforward said so. That afternoon, he was tied to a stake and executed for the crime of blaspheming against the gods. That was the famous Little Tom's truth. In the future, it became a challenge to authority, and it became an important fuse for the reformation of the churches of the gods. As for what was above the clouds, the earliest batch of Sky Knight who went above the clouds wisely avoided this question. In the modern era, some things could no longer be hidden. The fact that the divine realm was in another plane was placed before everyone's eyes. The so-called gods are watching over everyone became nothing more than empty words in the ancient books. The gods weren't omnipotent. The altars and churches were places where they were descended. If their true names were to be chanted, they might be able to hear it. As for other information, they could only be informed through the prayers of the reverend priests and bishops. Of course, it was possible to send incarnations or god envoys down to the mortal world, but the consumption wasn't low. The unknown and distance brought reverence. The struggle between the authority of the gods and the throne was endless. Even though deciphering the secrets of the gods had always been a taboo, every country had never stopped doing so privately. The era where every country had a true god as their representative had ended. This generation of gods had given humans more freedom, but it was foreseeable that with the start of the Holy War, the space for freedom would become less and less. The Holy War had become a historical necessity. The Order gods didn't even need to send an oracle for every country to start preparing for war. After all, the other party had already attacked. In this Holy War, all kinds of new aerial units would also welcome explosive development. The Ottoman Empire's aerial fleet might be unprecedented, but it definitely wouldn't be the last. The forbidden areas of the past had already been opened up to mortals. However, it wasn't easy to reach above the clouds. Even without the existence of this forbidden area, the high altitude above the clouds was still a forbidden area for ordinary air cavalry. After all, the low temperature, lack of oxygen, and low pressure were all at the same time. Even if a strong mount could withstand it, the knight riding on it would most likely die. At this moment, I was soaring alone in the sea of clouds, as though I was galloping on land. Irene Bela had transformed into a Pegasus, and the surrounding ice barrier isolated me from the low pressure and lack of oxygen. The coldness of the high altitude was nothing in front of the frigid nightmares. The advantages of a magic mount were obvious. However, the clouds were not empty. The mountain-like cloud whale in the distance was a stunning scene. Rather than saying that the cloud whale was an animal, it would be more accurate to say that it was a hybrid of half wind element and half living creature. It was at least 10 times larger than its kin in the sea. When it moved, it was able to whip up gales and clouds. Even the wind, elemental god, couldn't do anything to this gigantic creature. It was said that in ancient times, the ships and cities of the Black Nightmare tribe were also built in the clouds. They were the rather famous Cloud tribe. However, it was a pity that they were deprived of the right to fly and became pirates. I had always felt regretful that I was unable to appreciate the bizarre lifestyle of the Cloud tribe. System notice: you won't have to feel regretful very soon. I hope that you will still be in the mood to admire the scenery by then. Ignoring the system that suddenly popped up, I turned my attention to the scenery not too far away. The clouds were filled with all kinds of oddly shaped clouds. They were constantly changing. Some resembled mountains, some resembled trees, some resembled giants. They were just like the waves in the real sea, constantly changing their form as they came into contact with each other. Not all clouds were constantly changing. Under the effects of magic, some clouds wouldn't change in the slightest for hundreds of years. However, the more stable nests were the homes of the cloud beasts, and the residents there didn't seem to welcome our arrival. Even though we were running at full speed, there was still a group of cloud beasts chasing behind us. Most of them were friendly cloud dolphins. They were here to watch the show, and the little cloud dragons, as predators, were chasing us relentlessly. It seemed like they were courting death. Although they were called cloud dragons, they were actually little winged dragons that were only 1 meter long. It was evident that these little fellows with sharp teeth didn't care about our strength and intended to use us as a snack. Although Irene Bela was still far from her prime when she transformed into an ice dragon, the current her could easily deal with these little fellows by simply turning water into ice. However, I only patted her lightly, indicating for her to increase her speed and shake them off. Roar! After a low roar, the Pegasus unfurled its wings and transformed into a streak of light, instantly increasing the distance between us. Master Roland, are you very happy? I'm indeed very happy. Have you realized it? Of course I was happy. Otherwise, I wouldn't have run up to the clouds for a stroll. If I wanted to hurry on with my journey, it would be more suitable to fly at a low altitude. As for the reason why I was happy, I would have to start from the leak 3 days ago. In order to ensure that the true secret wouldn't be leaked, I didn't include the high-level plans in the courseware. What they could see were the possible tragedies that might occur in the future. Other than the undead calamity, the invasion of the demons, and the underground war, the courseware didn't even mention the reason and time of the war, not to mention the methods to deal with it. What they could probably know now was that they would encounter a series of calamities in the future, and I was currently working hard to resolve them. How I would resolve them, and how much chance I had of winning were all unknown. I was inviting my companions, but it seemed that this invitation lacked sincerity. Nodding in this kind of situation where the future was completely unknown was equivalent to handing over their future to me. The trust required wasn't just a little bit or two, and the building of trust required time. I could understand their hesitation and silence. Making someone work for me with just a few words only existed in illogical novels. If someone were to say to me in reality, "The world is about to be destroyed, and only by trusting in me will you be saved. Hand over your entire fortune to me," I would already be considered kind if I didn't slap him a few times. Perhaps this is the revelation that fate has given me. Lord Roland, I am willing to serve you. If destruction is to come, we will face it together. All right, just a moment ago, I said that the scene of a tiger trembling his underlings coming to his aid only existed in novels. But in the end, a silly lass jumped out to slap my face. Holy Knight is always the easiest to fool, and Diana was probably one of the easiest to fool among the Holy Knight. Her agreement was undoubtedly a good start, but what followed after was still a long silence. Lord Roland, actually, there is a Lich in Sulphur Mountain City who goes by this name. His relationship with you. Ingobiar's question seemed unimportant, but at this moment, it attracted everyone's attention. I hesitated for a moment. Since I decided to be honest with him, then I shouldn't spout nonsense at this crucial moment. It's me, but I can't tell you the reason for my revival. Then which legendary holy knight from 300 years ago, the legendary hero that the bunch of single-celled knights talk about every day, the final prince who left a heavy mark in history? This question was of a high standard. Looks like even though these fellows were fooling around for the past few days, they weren't idling around. At the very least, they were gathering intelligence and making plans for the future. If I didn't make up my mind to keep them here, some of them would have left on their own accord when we reached a safe zone. It's me, but I still can't tell you the reason. My mission made quite a few people suck in a breath of cold air. The comrade who was fooling around with them in the past suddenly turned into a legendary hero. Yet, the legendary hero was right in front of them, living together with them every day. While it was shocking, they couldn't help but wonder why he hid his identity and lived in Sulphur Mountain City for such a long time. One last question. What is your relationship with Lord Womiance? Comrade, our goals are the same, our methods are the same. From a certain perspective, we are as close as a single person. But since I have spoken to such an extent, those who choose to back out later will have to sign a confidentiality agreement. Even though I'm playing a word game, it is still the truth. We are the same person, so naturally, we are as close as a single person. Ingo looks at the silent Kolos by the side. The bishop of the god of law hesitates for a moment, but she still nods her head to acknowledge the truth of my words. All right, I can make the decision regarding my brother's matter. Our Safety Merchant Association has placed all our hopes on you, so you can order us around. But if it is a business transaction, remember to pay up. The famous saying of the goblins, those who are close to the ground are smart to settle the accounts. This time, it was my turn to be astonished. The greedy and selfish gnome was the most difficult target to convince from the very start. I had already made up my mind that it would be a victory if he stayed out of this matter, but he was the second person to nod in agreement. This was totally unexpected. Is there anything to be surprised about? Lich Roland has been our brother for many years, and Lord Womians is the person we respect the most. Since both of you said that destruction is imminent, is there a need to hesitate in finding a trustworthy backer? At the end of the day, it is still a matter of trust. Even if it is the best choice to stick together for warmth, if we were to find the wrong person to use as a shield, wouldn't we just end up as cannon fodder? Back then, Ingo Br agreed to it. The change in the direction of the situation was too sudden and timely. Not to mention the others. Even I suspected that Ingo might have set up a trap. However, his choice played a crucial role. I will listen to Big Brother Ingo, and I also trust Lord Womian's decision. I knew that his ascension to godhood wasn't without reason. Perhaps we are all in the same game, but I trust Womians, the chess player. He won't sacrifice us for nothing. The moment Cabala's words fall, the voice of the dwarf blacksmith resounds in the cabin. Since it is Lord Womian's intention, just say it. It is enough for us to trust him. Also, even though we are short, our eyes aren't blind. Without your help, we would have drowned in the prison. We will remember this favor. It is still normal for us to be here. But after that, Momo likes Lord Womians the most. All right, you should have found out about the formula of Womians equals Lich Roland equals Little Rolo. But what is the meaning of this confession that sneaked in amidst the chaos? Is food provided? Dishu, you fool. How can food be enough? That lord, is there meat in the food? Once every 3 days is enough. As long as food is provided, Kaven and Dishu should be the easiest to bribe. How can we? There are so many beauties in this world that we have yet to come into contact with. How can we allow them to be destroyed? For the sake of more beauties, we will do it. No matter who it is, as long as he intends to destroy this beautiful yet cruel world, I will fight with him until my last breath. This should be the normal reaction after knowing that the world is about to be destroyed. But after so many years, this is the first time I saw Beifong so serious. That faint soul radiance shows that he is comprehending and breaking through his bottleneck. A legend-rank Beast King Hunter is about to be born. I was wrong. In the past, our understanding of love was too one-sided. Loving a person doesn't mean that you must possess him. Protecting all beautiful existences is my true wish. Love is boundless. Kindness is like water. Goodbye, the me of yesterday, the me of today. I will comprehend the secrets of true love, the heart of universal love. I vow to protect all existences that are filled with charm, regardless of their race, age, gender, occupation, cold-blooded or warm-blooded, where they come from, whether they are alive or dead, whether they are an arthropod or a mammal. This is just like its name, to universal love. I have heard many vows before. Advancing into a legend rank is a summary and comprehension of one's past life. After advancing, the vows that one comprehends are usually the mantras of that person. However, this is the first time that I am unable to comment on it. Regardless of whether they are birds or beasts, regardless of whether they are forks or spoons, this vow sure is long. But why does it sound so wrong the more I listen to it? Look at my tiger folding stool. I can't take it anymore. Beat him up. Safe brand bricks are on sale. Please recognize this green label. Safe brand products are just that safe. Boom. Boom. The last part isn't the advertisement, but the sound of an explosion. To be able to make bricks have the ability to explode, BR Brothers, just how did you do it? Obviously, due to that shameless vow to protect, someone couldn't take it anymore and started to beat Beifong up as usual. Even though he was beaten up, Beifeng's great vow of true love didn't stop. The holy light of advancement continued. Looking at how long it lasted, the soul imprint that was formed was definitely abnormally strong. Perhaps Beifeng's advancement wasn't just any ordinary legend rank. Regardless of whether they are eggs or hens, regardless of whether they are S or M, all right, let us disregard that vow that is getting harder and harder to listen to. To advance to legend rank while enjoying being beaten up, this is probably the only one in this world. Even though it is as usual, it has to be said that after Beifeng's actions, the originally heavy atmosphere can no longer be solemn, making it easier for us to communicate. Should I say that Wumian's reputation is big enough? After knowing that this is the will of the god of Law Wumian's, the living treasures of the underground city joined him readily. However, as expected, they were rejected. Can I follow you temporarily? This kind of decision requires time. Tracy's decision can be considered polite. Most of the Ottoman citizens also made the same decision. However, there are still quite a number of Ottoman citizens who requested to disembark after some hesitation. The only fortunate thing is that there aren't many of them. The accumulation of trust requires time. Towards the suggestion of Tracy and the others, I agreed immediately. So be it. It is normal to be lured onto the ship at any time. However, I don't intend to force those who disembark. Sign a confidentiality contract with me, and I will allow you to disembark. However, you're not allowed to return to the Ottoman Empire within a year. Otherwise, it will be hard for you to explain your sudden disappearance and reappearance. You don't want to be locked up in the dungeon of the intelligence agency and forced to confess, right? The final result was better than I expected. Only 17 people insisted on disembarking the ship, and they're all talents that I poached before the fall of Kajisi. It can be said that this operation of persuasion was a complete success. Why wouldn't I be happy? I was immediately overjoyed. When the members of the Church of Law and my knight arrive, with these fellows as the backbone, many things might change. Perhaps we might be able to build a decent place. Sulphur Mountain City on the surface? It seemed like a good choice. Of course, no matter how happy I am, if it is just a spur of the moment, I wouldn't be allowed to stroll around alone. There's a reason why I'm traveling alone. I have already reached my destination. The collapsed mouth of the gigantic lion was still fresh in my mind. The events related to this location resurfaced in my mind. That rebellion completely subverted the understanding that the high-tier undead had of their own race. Near the entrance, two familiar figures draped in wide black cloaks. Their heads were lowered as they busied themselves in the ruins, seemingly searching for something. Kamigia, Fanderk, why are you here? Yes, the two figures in front of me are my knight Kamigia and Fanderk. Undead lords often have an inexplicable connection with their subordinates. It was because I sensed that they were here that I rushed over. Your Highness, we were supposed to head north after receiving the order. However, Lord Bastion said that the seal here has loosened, so he wanted us to come over to take a look. The Headless Knight's high-tier nightmare does possess the ability to fly. Fanderk is a frigid Maw Knight, so the two of them are indeed a suitable choice for scouting. Your Highness, Omar's seal has really been lifted. From the looks of it, it should be the doing of the Shilua Empire. They are simply courting death, past the resolution of the Parliament. From today onwards, Omar Mist will replace the missing Queen of Banshees, Heloise, as the new third senator. On the notice board outside the Parliament, there was a shocking news. A newcomer suddenly stood in the Shilua Empire. The undead who didn't know of Omar were asking about the identity of this fellow who popped out of nowhere. On the other hand, those who knew of Omar were cursing the insanity of the Parliament. Damn it, is the Parliament intending to exterminate all living beings? Aren't they afraid that Omar will go on a rampage again? Now, that Emperor Yongya isn't here, who can suppress that insane arrogance? From the moment I discovered the location of the two knight, I could roughly guess what had happened. However, it was still a piece of extremely bad news. In an instant, my good mood, which was high above the clouds a moment ago, plummeted to the bottom. However, since the seal has been lifted, there is no point in staying here. Since the destination is the Donalon Principality, I might as well bring the two-night back the way we came from and meet up with the Borealis at the agreed estuary. The journey back was rather smooth. However, when we reached the destination, we realized that the Borealis was entertaining guests. A gigantic octopus wrapped itself around the hull of the ship, and its poisonous ink dyed the entire sea black. On the other side, a unicorn whale was madly ramming against the hull of the ship. That white horn of the whale carried the power of the rainbow-colored elements, increasing the might of its ramming. At that moment, I immediately understood the reason why we were blocked by two sea monsters. Ha, darn bastards, I won't die so easily. Since I didn't die, you guys are dead for sure. The crow, laughing maniacally in midair, only had half of its feathers left, and its face was completely burnt, making it shockingly ugly. However, that familiar duck voice made me recognize him instantly. The Celestial Tower's cockroach number 1, Lamos's Eye, the guild leader of the Ottoman Empire branch. You sure are resilient. That day, when we were attacking, this fellow suffered a strategic-level fireball from the Mage Tower. Due to the haste of our retreat, we didn't manage to confirm the outcome of the battle. From the looks of it now, not only did he not die, he had been waiting for us after joining the Sea Folk. Perhaps he followed us all the way to the estuary before gathering the sea monsters to attack us. The Queen of Storms bestowed upon me power. I am Lamos's Eye, your most loyal servant. As though he was worried that he would be hit by the cannons below, he had already floated high up in the sky. The staff that carried god power was helping him control the sea monsters below. However, I was already circling above the clouds. So look, what did I discover? There is a lone astrologer here. We could try to capture it. A single astrologer can provide us with energy for a few days. They are rich in protein, but astrologers aren't easy to deal with. Their vitality is tenacious, and they escape extremely quickly. Just like their brother, Lord Cockroach, they are hard to capture. So, let's slowly approach it from above and be careful not to make any noise. Heh, I caught it. It is struggling really hard. Let's chop off its head and eat the rest of its body raw. Of course, if we aren't pressed for time, we can roast it first. That way, it will be more delicious. Their texture isn't bad. It tastes just like chicken. Stinky Roland, stop dubbing. You can't eat this kind of stolen goods. You will have diarrhea. Chapter 127. It is said that cockroaches are able to reproduce and escape even after losing their heads. However, it is apparent that their brother, the astrologer, doesn't have this ability. Just as mentioned before, that undying Lamos, I didn't even have the chance to show his face before he was killed amidst his cursing. He was flying too high and too close to the clouds. Suddenly, 3 aerial knights descended from the clouds and attacked him simultaneously. Before he could even react, he was beheaded by Camigia, who was the fastest. Based on his strength and identity, being ganged up on by 2 frigid Maw Knight and an undead Lord-class Headless Knight can be considered as using a butcher's knife to kill a chicken. He died a worthy death, with his head chopped off and his body frozen into ice and thrown into the water. I don't believe that this fellow can climb out of his grave to find trouble with me. Furthermore, the staff he used isn't any ordinary treasure. Will of the Mistress of the Storms. Through this staff, the user chosen by the Mistress of the Storms can become her representative and summon the sea monsters under her command to serve her. Prerequisites: the believer of Lady Storm or her designated target. This is a simple wooden staff made from old oak. The workmanship and materials used are of poor quality. Other than the god power contained within, it isn't worth mentioning. System notification. Through this wooden staff, a lady who has undergone menopause for 10,000 years is able to observe the user and his surroundings. She is currently observing you. You should understand. Of course I understand. Kacha. I knock the wooden staff on my knee and the god power staff breaks into 2. The indescribable energy within it starts to dissipate. Usually, when a vessel that holds the god power is damaged, the god power would either return to the gods or return to the earth and dissipate into the world. However, this time is slightly different. As one of the few existences who have personally come into contact with the essence of a true God's God power, I can faintly feel that the God power is circling around me, as though it is reluctant to part with me. God power doesn't have any intelligence. I don't think that the God power would be interested in me. Then, is it this? There isn't anything special about the old bottle. However, the moment I take it out, a formless God power starts to seep into it. A ripple appears at the bottom of the wave pattern on the bottle. In this world, divine power needed a carrier. Not just any random object could be used as a material for a divine artifact. Stonevilla's ocean bottle was once a divine artifact. However, with the fall of the true God, its divine power had completely dissipated over the years. Now that it had absorbed Lady Storm's divine power, it had actually recovered some of its power. Stonevilla's ocean bottle, unrated mystical item, can be upgraded, but due to the fall of its original true God, it can only reach the semi-god level at most. Calm Ocean. Upon activation, it can restore the liquid around the user to its most basic state. After absorbing the divine power of the Goddess of Storms, the effect of calming storms will be increased. Ocean God's favorite. The holder will become the messenger of the ancient ocean god. The holder can easily gain the trust and affection of the ancient sea people and sea monsters. When the affection reaches a higher level, the holder can attempt to sign a partnership contract. After the contract is signed, the holder can summon the holder to fight for you. Wrath of the Mistress of the Storms. That fiery lady has discovered that her divine power has been stolen, and this bottle has become the proof of her failure. The holder of this bottle will suffer the hostility of the Mistress of the Storms and will be hunted down. Osweiler's dissatisfaction. The current ocean god will pay close attention to any threat to his divine concept. Do not give him a chance to cause trouble. System notification. This is definitely a huge problem. I suggest that you immediately throw this bottle into the ocean. Of course, the rewards are also great with the risks. What will you get in exchange for offending two true gods? Do you want to know? Yeah, I don't know either. Looking at the system notification, I suck in a breath of cold air. As before, I ignore the system's malicious attempt to act cute at the end. Osweiler's dissatisfaction, and the fact that the god equipment and divine power are actively fused together is enough to explain a lot. The relationship between god equipment and divine power is usually one-to-one. The fact that the divine power is directly fused together and that calm ocean is enough to imply a lot. Stonevilla's divine power and Lady Storm's divine power are obviously related. Furthermore, they are most likely from the same source, which is why there is such a fusion and counterexistence. This current ocean god still thinks that this bottle will threaten his divine concept. Then what is hidden in this bottle? Is it a divine soul or a divinity? I vaguely guessed the truth. Without another word, I immediately took action. I stuffed the bottle into my inventory and activated the anti-detection magic ring. If such an item was exposed for even a moment longer, it could bring me trouble. What suggestion for me to throw him away? What big risk, big reward? System, are you trying to scam me again? You can just say that this thing is related to a huge secret. If I succeed, the reward will be huge. I definitely can't throw him away. Isn't that enough? System notification. Even if you want to earn money, you need to be alive to spend it. Are you sure you want to keep him? All right, you have guts. Then, just wait to take on a legendary tier quest. System countdown of 10 seconds. Final confirmation. 10-9-1. Host has confirmed. Wait a moment. Why is there a 1 after the 9? I haven't confirmed it yet. Also, what does legendary tier quest mean? Is it even scarier than an epic tier quest? At this point, if I still don't realize that I have been scammed by the system, I would really be a fool. Congratulations for triggering a legendary tier quest. Revival of the Ancient Ocean God. The Ancient Ocean God Stonevilla was once one of the strongest gods of that era. At his peak, there were several main gods under his command. That year, Lady Storm was just a rookie that couldn't even be ranked. The current ocean god Oswald's grandfather, the ancient ocean god Bose, hadn't even been born yet. The ocean that he ruled alone surpassed the entire continent. In fact, he even tried to challenge the dignity of the goddess of order. As for what the outcome was, Since his bottle is in your hands, there is probably no need to say more. Although he has already fallen, due to a coincidence, the god equipment that contains his inheritance and secrets fell into your hands. Furthermore, it was activated by the god power of the same origin. Perhaps, during the twilight of the gods, the might of the ancient ocean god will make a comeback. System notice. As the difficulty of this quest is too high, based on your current strength, the possibility of completing it is extremely low. Thus, this quest has been split into 3 parts. Rewards will be calculated for each part completed, and there is no penalty for failure. There is no need for a penalty even if you fail. First quest requirement. Gather the god power related to the ocean to feed Stonavilla's ocean bottle, allowing it to evolve into a semi-god equipment. Hint: don't go looking for trouble with the ocean god right from the start. The powerful sea monsters left behind from the ancient times will have a small amount of the ocean god's god power. First quest reward. Semi-god equipment Stonavilla's ocean bottle, 100,000 fate points. Additional rewards depend on the completion of the quest. The basic reward for the first quest is 100,000 fate points. Then wouldn't it be 400,000 to 500,000 fate points if it was really completed? Back then, it wasn't easy for me to complete the epic tier quest. I spent so much effort and even killed a demon count, but it only gave me 120,000 fate points. But thinking about it from another angle, a demon count would appear in an epic tier quest. What kind of enemy would I meet in a legendary tier quest? Let's do it. The courageous will be stuffed to death, and the timid will starve to death. With these fate points, not only will I be able to catch up with the progress of my plans, I can even bring them forward. My hesitation, in the eyes of Comisia and Fanderk, became my worry for the current situation. Your Highness, do you need us to make a move? Even though Lamosai, the one who drove the sea monsters to attack the Borealis, has died, the battle on the ocean didn't stop. On the contrary, due to the loss of their controller, the sea monsters fought instinctively, becoming even more intense and bloody. Giant octopuses are the most commonly seen sea monsters. In fact, they can't even be called sea monsters anymore. However, a gigantic creature that is 100 to 200 meters long is definitely a super sea monster. In front of it, even the sturdy and massive sea giants are just delicious food. The octopus in front of us is a snow-white ice magic beast. In the Bellow Sea where it often appears, it has the nickname of despairing living iceberg. No matter what kind of ship encounters it, it will be dragged into the deep sea and drown. Covered in a thick ice armor, it looks very beautiful. If it were to shrink countless times, it might even become the darling of a noble lady. However, with its poisonous ink, it is actually extremely dangerous and fatal. When it realized that it was unable to drag the warship into the sea, half of the giant octopus's body wrapped around the Borealis, starting to display its superiority in close combat. Ice-cold magic continuously froze the seawater around the Borealis. Its tentacles, which are filled with suction cups, lashed at the body of the ship like whips. Some of the tentacles are even wielding iceberg-like ice blades and chunks of ice. Its poisonous ink is even spewing out like a torrential rain. Naturally, the Borealis isn't idle either. Its heavy cannons, which are laced with corrosive poison, continue to bombard the giant octopus with it. Even though the poison is ineffective against the ice armor of the giant octopus due to its attribute restraints, the bombardment of over 100 cannons still managed to leave the giant octopus with wounds all over its body. Its left eye has already been blasted apart. Under its ice armor, there are countless wounds that haven't been healed in time. The gigantic beasts are slow and robust. The battle between them often relies on their innate physical talents to fight head-on. There aren't any tricks that they can play. From our point of view, the battle between these gigantic beasts is quite similar to a street brawl between hoodlums. The giant octopus that is riding on the warship, wielding an ice blade and continuously striking the ship, is quite similar to the hysterical lady who used a small purse to smash the heartless man. The poisonous ink and spitting saliva are extremely similar. On the other hand, the narwhal on the other side has a completely different appearance. It is a brawny man wielding a 1,000-pound hammer, looking for an opportunity to deal a fatal blow. Whales are one of the largest natural sea beasts. The appearance of the narwhal is just an enlarged version of an ordinary whale. The part of the monster that floats on the surface of the water is at least a dozen stories tall. From head to tail, it is at least 300 meters tall. Its gigantic body creates an incomparable might. Just a flick of its tail is able to bring about a huge wave. When it lowers its head and charges, it is even more violent. In front of the narwhal, the super warship borealis is just like a skinny dwarf. Every time it charges, it would bring about an impact that could topple the mountains and overturn the seas. That gigantic horn of the narwhal is like a sharp blade, multiplying the threat of the narwhal. Just by looking at the situation on the battlefield, the borealis is completely suppressed and could disintegrate at any moment. It is no wonder that the two knights suggested for us to intervene and help. However, I shook my head. The battle before us isn't suitable for us to intervene, and there is no need for us to intervene. There is no need. Don't look down on that ship. That is the brother captain. Hearing that, the two of them were stunned for a moment. Then, the Death Knight Fandurk exclaimed in surprise. Again? Your Highness, Omar has just escaped. You have created all sorts of weird things again. You won't lose control this time, right? Before he could finish his words, Camisia hurriedly covered Fandurk's mouth. Fool, have you forgotten that His Highness hates it when people criticize his creations? He treats them as his own children. If you scold his children to his face, do you think he won't find a chance to teach you a lesson? Also, what do you mean by all sorts of weird things? If these words were to reach Captain Bastion's ears, how do you think he would deal with you? Do you still want to be a clown and ride a wheelbarrow through a ring of fire? Or do you want to wear a lion costume and give balloons to those naughty kids to play with? If you're courting death, don't drag me down with you. Last time, those naughty kids kicked my head around like a ball. Right, whenever I think about it, I get so angry. Back then, I clearly asked for help. Why didn't you help me? Instead, you made a headless night chase after my own head, and I even had to be careful not to hurt anyone. Do you know how uncomfortable it was? Back then, when we saw the ball chirping so happily and those naughty kids were so happy, everyone was happy. We thought that you were having fun with those naughty kids, so we could relax a little. The last time, Old List's ribs were stolen by those naughty kids. Afterwards, he was found in the pit where Stray Dog sold the leftovers of his lunch. That fermented smell. If it gets to that point, I would rather fight a final battle with the Holy Church. Thinking about the Red Hunting Hound's punishment of having fun with those naughty kids, thinking about those naughty kids that even gods and demons would avoid, my most righteous knight subdued without hesitation. That, Your Highness, I apologize for my slip of the tongue. Please don't take it to heart. Originally, I was indeed a little angry that my darling was criticized. However, when I thought about Omar, who successfully rebelled just a few years after his birth, and how we might be able to meet again very soon, I didn't have the mood to take it to heart. In order to allow them to reach the pinnacle independently, after designing the optimal path for them to become stronger, I didn't impose any restrictions on them. All I did was to give them sufficient space to develop. Was such a laissez-faire method wrong? Omar, now that I have calmed down and thought back on what happened back then, it was all my fault. I shook my head. Envy Borealis and pride, Omar, were two completely different things. Envy was just a modification of a ship. No matter how strong it was just an individual. On the other hand, Omar was different. He was able to create the strongest army by himself. At his peak, he was able to fight against the attacks of the other deadly sins by himself. The head of the deadly sins, the sin of pride, was designed from the very start to be the leader of the 7 deadly sins and my adjutant. From the moment he was born, he was already extremely unique. His overly high expectations created excessive arrogance and ambition. Being too young, he lacked self-control and rationality. Although his abilities were outstanding, his temperament wasn't mature enough to be independent. When it was finally decided that Bastion would become the commander of my army, Omar had long regarded the position as something that he deserved. To Omar, who was the incarnation of pride, his life had always been smooth sailing, but a single setback was so huge. How could the young sin of pride bear such a huge psychological blow? After that, he flipped the table like a naughty kid who lost and used his own ability to rebel. What ability is that? While I was thinking back on the past, the situation of the battle below had changed. The Batter Borealis suddenly shone with a green light. Then, the surrounding seawater bypassed the obstruction of the ice layer and rushed towards it. Bathed in seawater, the surroundings of the warship glowed even brighter. Then, the damaged skin and parts of the warship began to automatically regenerate. After 10 seconds, when the seawater returned and the green light faded, the Borealis, which was covered in patches just a moment ago, looked brand new, as if it had just left the factory. Wasn't this familiar? This was the nine-headed dragon's signature ability, the self-regeneration ability that gave us such a headache back then. The Borealis finally began its counterattack. Its first target was the huge, single-horned whale that was charging toward it again. The dragon head statue at the bow of the warship shone with a red light. The power of envy that had been stored on the warship for a long time finally reached its activation condition and began to activate. The red light struck the whale with a single horn, causing it to instantly roll around in the water in pain. Right after that, the ferocious image of the nine-headed dragon emperor flashed across the whale's head. As the whale trembled all over, the gigantic horn suddenly flew off, and a gigantic bloody hole appeared on the whale's head. Fresh blood spurted out, instantly dyeing the seawater red. On the other side, several seconds later, the gigantic horn floated to the bow of the Borealis and automatically linked together. From then on, the Borealis had the strongest natural collision horn. Envy? It's because of comparison. Nobody can be perfect. It's normal to meet someone who is stronger than you in a certain aspect. It's even more normal to feel envy and unwillingness. If the envy is moderate, it can motivate one to work hard to catch up. This is often called motivation. If the envy is excessive, it will become resentment towards others. At that time, the resentment will become the most dangerous envy. The butterfly has beautiful wings, but I don't. That's why I was jealous, so I tore off her wings and made her into a specimen. This way, I would have a delightful collection and the butterfly would no longer annoy me by flying all over the sky. Eagles have beautiful wings that allow them to soar in the blue sky. We humans aren't born with wings, but we still dream of flying in the sky. That's why, through the hard work of countless people, we have aircraft that mimic their appearance. And my Borealis, the envy of the 7 deadly sins, is a combination of the 2 types of envy. If he was envious of the butterfly's wings, he would directly tear off the butterfly's wings and attach them to his body. That way, he would be able to fly. Although the design of this envy wasn't easy, I already had a backup plan and the technology was already in place. The biggest problem up until now had always been the materials. After all, in order to assemble different parts, one would need to have a source of power to make them work. And it would already be a miracle if the opposing magic power didn't explode. How would it be possible to make all the different organs function normally? Don't tell me that I have to prepare a power source and interface for all the parts and organs? Then what's the point of stealing? However, the 9-headed dragon's heart and his legendary ranked 9-colored teardrop stone perfectly solved this problem. Actually, the 9-headed dragon wasn't considered strong among dragons. He only had 2 talents that I was interested in. One of them was self-regeneration, and the other was his compatibility with different elements of magic power. Each of the 9-headed dragons' 9 heads had different elements, but under the control of a single source of magic power, he was able to use breath of 9 different elements. It was as if he was an archmage with 9 jobs. I had already revealed the secret behind this to the town security. Legendary ranked 9-colored teardrop stone allows magic power of the same origin to freely change its attributes after passing through it. The simple explanation of the system couldn't hide the noble identity of the semi-god 9-headed dragon. After some research and adjustments, The nine-headed dragon's heart and the nine-color teardrop stone were able to display the advantage of being a universal power source, becoming the power source and conversion device of the envy combination. Judging from a successful process of stealing the horn of a narwhal and the successful fusion process, the design of envy had already succeeded. This sudden battle was already nearing its end. When the strongest warship of the Ottoman Empire fused with my necromancy creation, when science and magic came together, the strongest monster warship of this era was born. The horn of a narwhal was connected to its skull. That was its strongest point, but it was also its greatest weakness. Now that it had lost its horn, even if it were to be left alone, it wouldn't be far from death. Seeing that its comrade was about to die and that the envoy of Lady Storm, who drove it to battle, was nowhere to be seen, the octopus, Snow Octopus, released the warship without hesitation and started to escape. Let's go. I'm afraid that we still have some work to do. Yes, Envy had used his untested talent in his first real battle. I'm afraid that the interior of the warship is in a mess now. I have to quickly make some adjustments. But when I walked to the front, Comisia and Fander didn't follow me. They stopped. Your Highness, isn't it a little inappropriate for us to be like this? Let's just follow the warship. Actually, it's the same. I was stunned for a moment before coming to a realization. So they were hesitating because of their undead identity and were worried that they wouldn't be able to get along with the living. Unlike Sulphur Mountain City, which was already used to undead, the humans on the surface had a long history of fear and hatred towards the undead. It was normal for a holy knight to rush up to kill an undead upon seeing one. Comisia and Fanderk's worries weren't unfounded. But in response to their hesitation, I resolutely shook my head. Let's go. An ugly daughter-in-law will eventually have to meet her parents-in-law. There are some things that are easier to be exposed the more you hide it. The more lies you spread, the harder it will be to clean up. Since it is fated that we can't hide it, we might as well do it openly right from the start. Just like the river Styx, the heaven's pillar seems to go straight up, but in reality, it has to pass through countless different planes to reach the god realm of the various true gods. Among the many god realms of the different planes, there is one that is exceptionally deserted. While the other god realms would receive countless souls every day, there are only a few souls that enter this plane in a month. The god realm of the law god Womians. Unless the owner invites it, invading the god realm is the most severe act of war. Womian's god realm hasn't received any visitors so far. In fact, no one, not even the gods, knows what Womian's looks like. The massive god realm is empty. The petitioners that should be used to provide the power of faith are wandering aimlessly. There isn't even a single god envoy to maintain order here. The law god and the god of holy light have both lost their sense of self. That unlucky Basra was actually thrown to the law god Womians. Looks like the goddess of moonlight is furious. Perhaps this is a secret of the gods in the mortal world. However, among the gods and their servants, it is a fact that everyone knows. Loaned to Basra, who was the target of the goddess of moonlight's wrath, became the unlucky fellow in everyone's eyes. Basra had been bored in the god realm for so many days and really thought that he had been abandoned. However, he suddenly found out that he was summoned by the true god Womians. Don't be too surprised when you see Womians. While waiting for the summon, Basra couldn't help but recall the mysterious words that the goddess of moonlight said a few days ago. However, it is a pity. Even if he has 3 heads and 6 arms, he can't scare me, Basra. When he really saw Womians, in order to prevent himself from shouting out rudely, he almost pinched off the flesh on his thigh. In order to prevent the shock in his heart from showing on his face, Basra's usually calm face was forcefully twisted into a ball. The reason? Womians didn't wear a mask in the god realm. Wasn't this face that he saw not too long ago? Basra, follow my will and become my envoy. Arrive in the mortal world. When Basra walked out of the god palace, his legs, which should never get tired in theory, felt weak. This hero, who had never retreated from hundreds of battles, was afraid. He finally understood the feeling of being cannon fodder in a war. This time, you guys are really playing big. However, since we are already on the pirate ship, let's play to the end. Chapter 128. Shut down valves 17 to 30 immediately. The third engine room is on fire. Evacuate the crew. Where's the firefighting team? There's no such personnel? Forget it, find an ice mage. Also no, is Princess Renee around? The port cabin C-15-21 is leaking. Where's the repairman? Also no. All right, freeze the leaking area and wait for it to stabilize before proceeding with the repairs. Has Princess Renee gone to the engine room? Knight Eloin, it's your turn. What? Your frigid maw is a snowman that only knows how to fight and not freeze? Papaya head, what's the use of keeping you if you're so useless? Tie yourself and the snowman to the hole to block the water. Where did those darned engineers go? What? They ran to the bow of the ship to look at the newly installed ram? Isn't that the innate ability of this ship? They don't even know magic, so what can they see? What? They want to look at it because it's illogical? That bunch of bastards, Your Highness Grim, please help me bring them back. No, you don't have to do anything. I should say, please don't do anything. As long as you stand beside them, they will return on their own. Red alert, what happened? What? Knight Eloin really tied himself and the snowman to the hole and was washed away. I was just complaining and making an analogy. He actually did it? That papaya head. Damn it, someone get Tracy to fish up that foolish knight. I'm already busy enough, and he's still causing trouble. Your Highness Renee, please head to the bridge. Someone is looking for you there. That, Lady Diana, I know that you're very agitated and want to find an enemy to fight, but can you not stand in the middle of the corridor in full armor and obstruct our work? I've already received dozens of reports, all of them complaining about being scratched by your expensive armor and obstructing our work. That legendary half-dragon Beast King Hunter on the deck. The battle is already over. Your great beast-taming art isn't effective. Die and come back. I almost succeeded. Passing on love takes time. Also, can you blame me for this failure? You said you love him while beating him up. Is there any possibility of that? Well, a certain indescribable man's voice was so striking even in the midst of chaos. Kelly and Harlow's voices echoed in the cabin. A bunch of weirdos were either helping or hindering them. In any case, none of them were idling around. Regardless of how well designed the Borealis was and how powerful it was in theory, it was still a new ship that had not experienced the test of actual combat. Furthermore, it was facing two super sea monsters for the first time in a battle of attrition, which was too difficult for it. It seems that I was too confident in Envy. It wasn't just the sea monster that was pushed to its limits. The Borealis was probably at its limits as well. Actual combat was always the most effective platform for testing. The first to show problems were always shortcomings and weaknesses. Under the attacks of the octopus and the narwhal, the places that were not covered by the undead transformation naturally could not heal and regenerate. The places where the energy pipes were not solid enough and the design was not effective were also riddled with holes. As the soul of the warship, Envy was still a newborn baby in the long life of an undead. It was still unable to stand on its own. Maintaining all of the heavy cannons and controlling the fleet consumed all of its energy. Using its self-healing talent repeatedly consumed a large portion of its magic power. These flaws weren't much of a problem. From a prototype to a real battle-ready model, it had to constantly expose and fix its flaws. However, if it were to be destroyed in an actual battle, there would probably be no future for it. Little Roland is back? That's great. Hurry up and help out on the port deck. It is still leaking. I was sent on a mission the moment I arrived. Yet I smiled. Kelly, don't just grab me to be your helper. There are two old acquaintances here who can listen to your commands. Fandirk is also a frigid Maw Knight. Even though Casimias is foolish, he still has some strength despite his foolishness. Aren't they? All right, I understand. It has been a long time since we last met. On behalf of the Mist Country, I welcome your return. However, this isn't the time to reminisce. Little Fandirk, please help me freeze the leaking areas. Sir Casimias, please help adjust the sails on the deck. Big Sister Kelly, it's great that you're fine. Hearing the familiar voice, Fandirk was a little agitated. However, he calmed down soon after. All right, we will do our best. As for Casimias, he He was a man of action. The moment he finished speaking, he had already set off. However, from his energetic appearance and the phrase, "Welcome back," he was still very happy. That day, the signature ice Aeon was displayed. How could the divine might of Emperor Yongye's signature Black Skeleton King be hidden? Furthermore, the war flag of the Red Hunting Hounds had been a mist war flag for many years. The rumor that Emperor Yongye was the Holy Knight Roland had been circulating among the upper echelons of the human race. In the eyes of those who were observant, it was probably impossible to hide my identity. I didn't doubt that there would be people who would guess that I was Emperor Yongye, especially after it was revealed that I was an undead Lich. At the very least, Kelly definitely knew about it. Of course, some things wouldn't be good if they were to be exposed. If Donglon was really related to Emperor Yongye, there would definitely be a lot of trouble. Since they didn't intend to expose it, then so be it. Perhaps it was due to their mutual assistance in the midst of the storm, or perhaps it was because they had expected it. The two undead knights were quickly accepted by the crowd. However, the crowd was more or less an exaggeration. Needless to say, the gentlemen of the underground world were mostly used to interacting with the undead. The knight of the Donglon Kingdom was a little surprised to see the undead knight who had stepped forward to help them. However, after realizing that the two intelligent undead were actually the heroic knight of their predecessors, their attitude changed. After Kelly and Renee pulled them aside and said something to them, especially after seeing the iconic Frigid Mom mount, the initial guarded attitude of the undead turned into reverence. Every day, I could see the knight surrounding the two undead knight to ask for advice. Casimius and Fandirk also happily imparted their experiences and battle techniques to the younger generation of knight. Looking at this situation, I heaved a sigh of relief. After all, it was a gamble to allow the undead to head to the kingdom of the living. However, since the knight was able to get along well with the undead knight, it could be considered as a good start. Of course, this was also due to the fact that the gods were busy with the start of the Holy War. If it wasn't for the fact that the Donglon Kingdom believed in the absolute and just God of Law as a national religion, I wouldn't have considered such a shocking proposal from the start. Even after the underground dwellers and the people of Donglon were able to accept the two knight, I still said that the people accept the undead knight was an exaggeration because of the Ottoman Kingdom. In most of the human kingdoms, the Donglon Principality was a border barbarian country. From the very start, they had drifted away from the mainstream of human society. Furthermore, due to the incident in the past, their relationship with the various countries and the churches of the gods was poor. Due to the historical records, Definder was once the land of the dead, and the Royal Knight Order became the Undead Knight Order to take revenge on their enemies. They didn't view the undead as much. Furthermore, the two undead knight were historical heroes of the Mist Country, and with the guarantee of the Mist royalty, it wasn't difficult for them to get along with the undead. On the other hand, the Ottoman Kingdom was one of the major human empires. Ever since they were young, they were taught that the undead were evil and the enemies of the living. Furthermore, due to the undead calamity 100 years ago and the pressure brought by the Shilla Empire, the churches of the gods repeatedly propagated them to accept that staying on the same ship with the undead was no different from being locked in a cage with a tiger. This was the mainstream view of human society. Anything that was related to the undead was evil, and the undead emperor was the most evil of all evil. Thus, on the second day, I received more than 30 complaints. There were even more than 10 people who changed their minds and decided to disembark. Why don't we just fly along with them? The past few days have already been enjoyable. After all, it is normal for the living to be different from the dead. The two knight who were hiding under their cloaks requested to leave, but I shook my head in rejection. This was all within my expectations, and I had already made up my mind long ago. Take off your cloaks and live your lives openly, just like how you did in Sulphur Mountain City. You don't owe this world anything, and you don't owe anyone anything. On the contrary, this evil world owes you a lot. My words caused the two knight to lower their heads, but they didn't say anything to refute or agree. I knew that they were still hesitating, afraid that their appearance would cause a flaw in my plan. Since we have already decided to walk down this path, there is no possibility of turning back. Since we intend to create a sulfur mountain city on the surface so that the innocent won't be discriminated against or punished because of their race and identity, this is equivalent to breaking away from the mainstream thinking of this world. There will be many difficulties, and this obstacle is just an appetizer. We have to overcome it. Since those who should leave will leave sooner or later, there is no need for us to care about it. Those who walk different paths can't make plans together. In reality, since we are already on different paths, we won't be able to work together, even if we want to. If they want to leave, then let them leave. From the very start, I only need those who walk the same path. Winter always comes early in the north. In the common sense of the Northlanders, before the long and arduous winter arrives, they have to prepare rations to tide through the winter and make preparations to guard against the beast hordes. The beast hordes in winter are the hardest to deal with. Hunger will drive them crazy, and the result of the snow sealing the mountains is that they will gather in groups and challenge the human cities at all costs. Anyway, there isn't much difference between dying of starvation and dying in battle. Rather than starving to death or freezing to death, they might as well take a gamble. When the Mist Kingdom was at its peak, they would take the initiative to clear out the beast hordes around the cities and even in the snowy mountains. On one hand, they would hunt some prey for winter food, and on the other hand, they would do their best to reduce the number of beasts to a certain level to reduce the pressure that the cities might face during winter. When winter really comes, it is the Knight's favorite winter hunting season. At that time, even if it isn't for rations, the Knight would still take the initiative to hunt and disperse the beast hordes. When there isn't any war, the winter hunting is the best stage to display one's strength. Every year, there would be a Knight heading deep into the mountains in search of powerful beasts as prey. However, the current Donlan Principality no longer has the strength to do so. The lack of rations and ferocious beasts are still a sharp sword hanging over their heads. Every winter is exceptionally difficult to endure. In this world where the strong preys on the weak, a small country without any fighting strength will only grow weaker and weaker. The war 20 years ago caused the Donlan Principality to lose its last piece of demonic gold mine, and its days became even more difficult to endure. Sorrowing, an ordinary small town near the capital of the Donlan Principality, defined her. While the plains of the Ottoman Empire are still in the midst of warm summer, here it is already beginning to fall. In the past, this was the busiest time of the year, the harvest season that brings joy and sorrow to the people. Being able to harvest rations naturally makes people happy. However, if the harvest isn't good most of the time, there would be sorrow in the midst of joy. Half of the time in the northern lands is winter, and, coupled with the frozen soil, it is normal for the crops that barely ripen once a year to be lacking in harvest. This harvest often determines whether or not one will be able to survive the difficult winter. Every year, at this time, everyone's mood isn't very good. But this year, even though the harvest isn't good, the situation is slightly different. Don't worry, we have it all. We have it all. The young warrior with the royal emblem is happily distributing the rations. When there isn't enough rations, it is normal for the royal family and the local nobles to come and provide disaster relief. However, the royal family isn't rich to begin with, and they can't buy much rations either. Although the military nobles of the northern lands are famous for being able to fight, they are also famous for being extremely poor. They even have to think of ways to get their own rations through the winter. Thus, the rations distributed every year will run out soon, and every year's winter is still a difficult time. In the past, the distribution of rations was like a war, with everyone trying their best to be first. But this time, they really line up neatly. The reason? There are more than 10 carriages and a small mountain of supplies behind the warrior. Since there is enough to distribute, there is naturally no need to fight over it. Princess Renee's visit to the Ottoman Empire this time was very successful. Not only did she raise the prestige of our country, she also won a lot of rations and supplies for us. Everyone, don't worry, we have all. There are rations, new clothes, and quilts. This is completely different from how they usually look at the lack of rations and frown. This time, The joyful young warrior distributes rations and promotes the grace of the royal family. Brother Knight, can you give little Ailey some more rations? Last year, you only gave little Ailey a bag of rice, and little Ailey was so hungry in the end. The young warrior is stunned. He still remembers the 7 or 8-year-old green-haired little girl. Last year, she came with her mother. Seeing that the little girl and her mother were starving, he gave some of his rations to her. At that time, even though the rations they received were still not much, the mother and daughter thanked him profusely and left. Little girl, I can give you a little more this year, but your family is an adult. Ailey is still so young. How can he let this child come and collect rations alone? 2 years ago, Daddy was bitten to death by a pack of wolves while protecting Mommy and me. Mommy gave little Ailey all her food last winter, and in the end, she didn't survive. Now, little Ailey is the only one left in little Ailey's family. But Mommy has taught little Ailey how to sew, so little Ailey can make a living by sewing clothes. Children of the poor take charge of the household at an early age. Even though she is only 7 or 8 years old, this poor little Ailey speaks like a little adult. However, she doesn't know that she can't even sew her own dolls well. So how can she earn money? It's just that the little girl doesn't eat much, so the surrounding neighbors try to take turns to help this pitiful but strong little girl. Hearing the quiet, grievous news, the warrior is immediately stunned, as if something is stuck in his chest. He can't speak for a long time, and in the end, he can only sigh. After all, he has experienced too many such misfortunes in this land. Even if he is filled with passion, how much can he help? In the face of endless misfortune, he has long become numb. This land has been barren for many years, and he is only a warrior. The only thing he can do is perhaps to hunt for more prey. Perhaps there are enemies of little Ailey among them. The rations are a little heavy. I don't think little Ailey can carry them. Little Ailey can play in the plaza for a while. After the rations are distributed, I will help you carry them home. All right. Thank you, Brother Knight. Then little Ailey will go to the Gemini Plaza to play. See you under the statue later. The young warrior with a face full of pimples looks at the figure of the still strong little girl skipping away. He shakes his head, sets his thoughts aside, and continues to distribute the rations. Looks like I still have to distribute all my rations this year. All right, since it is the autumn harvest, there should be field mice in the fields, right? Go dig some weeds and tree roots. I can also sneak into the kitchen to steal some. Hey, the brawny man over there. Aren't you embarrassed to take so much by yourself? Share some with the others. What? You're helping that old lady to take it? My bad. Thus, the impetuous young warrior hurriedly apologizes for his mistake. Little Ailey loves the Gemini Plaza, not only because it is the place where her parents met and fell in love, but also because there is a beautiful statue there. Her mother used to tell her many stories under the statue. The color of the old statue has already faded, but the heroic posture of the two young knight on it is still as striking as ever. The one standing slightly taller is the elder brother. He raises the magnificent longsword that is the embodiment of the Mist Kingdom's authority and charges forward angrily. Nothing can stop him. At this moment, his silver armor is stained with the blood of the enemy leader. The one standing below is a valiant young warrior. He holds a flaming magic staff in one hand and a huge sword in the other. He seems to be chanting some kind of mysterious incantation. The two golden-haired youths who seem to be only 13 or 14 years old. The faces of the two statues are exactly the same, clearly indicating that they are twins. Even though the statue is already rotten to the point where the elder brother is missing an arm and the younger brother is missing a leg, their unyielding will is evident. While the rest of the plaza is covered in fallen leaves and dust, the surroundings are clean and tidy. This is enough to prove the uniqueness of this statue. This is the symbol of the Donglon Principality, the twin statues that can be seen in almost every city. From a certain perspective, they are also the embodiment of the Mist People's unyielding will and guardian spirits. Recently, in order to boost the morale of the citizens, Princess Renee has been trying her best to imitate one of them. That, Big Knight brother, this is for you. Please continue to protect our city. What Ailey placed under the statue is half a piece of black bread. This is the last of her rations. She remembers that in the past, her mother did this too. When she was young, Ailey's mother would tell her stories, and the story of these two big night brothers is the most repeated one. Even though she can't remember the content of the story clearly, little Ailey remembers that in the end, it was always the big night brother who chased away the bad guys and protected everyone. She also remembers that this is what her mother said back then. Under the efforts of the princes, the demons and beastmen were chased back to their homeland. The greedy neighboring country's king and the hypocritical church received their punishment. Everyone lived a happy life once again. But Ailey is still hungry. Is this a happy life? She still remembers the bitter smile on her father's face back then. That is because Daddy is useless, unable to give you a happy life. But believe in Daddy. As long as we meet with danger, Daddy will be like the twin night brothers who sacrificed their lives for the country, risking their lives to protect you and Mommy, as well as everyone else. She still remembers the blissful smile on her mother's face back then. Martin, I believe that you are the best knight. If you really meet with danger, you will definitely try your best to fulfill your vow. She still remembers how heartbroken her mother was when her father fulfilled his vow. Silly Martin, I don't want any night brothers. I just want you to come back. When will these bitter days come to an end? She still remembers how her mother still managed to smile before her death last year. Little Ailey, don't hate this world and don't hate this country. His Majesty the King died in battle, and Princess Renee took up the mantle at the age of 14. The Mist royal family has already sacrificed everything to fulfill their vow to protect the country. What else do we have to complain about? But remember the words that your father loved to say when he was alive. Hope is always at the end of despair. As long as the Mist flag flies, we, the people of Mist, will never give up on hope. Little Ailey, Mommy and Daddy are useless, unable to give you a decent life. But please face life with a smile. As long as you work hard, there will be a day when you meet hope. Who knows? The twin stars might descend once more to save this country that is on the verge of destruction. She still remembers how hard she tried to remember those words back then, but she couldn't remember them all. The one that left the deepest impression in her mind was the twin stars who wanted to save the country. Big Brother Knight, perhaps you won't come to save this country next year, but please bless Ailey to survive this winter, and also Grandpa Margie, Big Brother Colorado, and Aunt Annie. Right? And Lulu, even though she always bullies me, please bless her so that she can play with me next year. Please don't blame her. She doesn't have a daddy or a mommy. So please bless. And bless that kind Big Brother Knight over there. Little Ailey recited over 100 names in a single breath, including the little yellow dog that had bitten her. While she was still trying hard to think of other names that required blessings, her prayers that had never been answered before were answered for the first time. Yes, next year, this country will be saved by the twin stars. Yes, everyone will be blessed. At the very least, no one will starve to death. Yes, at the very end of despair, there will definitely be a sliver of hope. When a Mist flag flies once more, all of the Mist citizens will be saved. As soon as those words fell, the figure that flashed by and that familiar face caused little Ailey to exclaim in shock. Big Brother Knight. At this moment, the young warrior had finally finished distributing the rations. Carrying his and little Ailey's rations, he walked over. However, what greeted him was a flustered little Ailey. Big Brother Knight. It's Big Brother Knight. Big Brother Knight has come back to life. He said that he will bless everyone and save this country. Following little Ailey's finger, the elder brother in the sculpture of the twin stars was pointing the Roland sacred sword in his hand into the distance. The young warrior Cloer was taken aback for a moment before nodding his head with a smile. Prince Roland will forever protect the Mist country. The will of the Mist will never yield to him. Chapter 129. Sound from beyond the mountains break, passing through winter and spring. The closer I get to my hometown, the more afraid I become to ask who it is. As we headed north, the closer I got to this familiar land, the more I felt the feeling of the closer I get to my hometown, the more afraid I become to my hometown. It was a pity that the situation was getting worse and worse, and I couldn't even be a coward. Since I was destined to be unable to avoid it, then I would just do my best to face it. Under my request, the Borealis would stop at every town, and I would walk around to check out the situation. Due to the frequent stops, the journey from Donlon Principality to the capital, which should have taken at most a week, had already taken more than 2 months. This was my usual style of doing things, and it was also the administrative basics that I taught Anne and Renee. Sitting at the top and giving orders blindly wouldn't solve the problem. In order to solve the problem, one had to first find out what the problem was. In this aspect, waiting at home for a report and personally witnessing it were two completely different feelings. 20 people starved to death, and personally witnessing 10 corpses frozen to death on the streets, witnessing the tragedy of swapping children for food, were two completely different things. The former was just a report that the higher-ups would forget after reading it, while the latter would cause any ruler with a conscience to be unable to sleep at night. But at this moment, the more I investigated, the more depressed I felt. The situation was far worse than I had expected. The worst-case scenario had come true. After losing the last of its mines, the financially bankrupt Donglon had been struggling at death's door for the past 20 years. The war with the Beastmen in the north a year ago had shaken the last of Donglon's foundations. After the war had used up the last of the country's resources, the country was unable to purchase enough food to last through the winter. In reality, the Donglon Principality was on the verge of collapse. This year's harvest was as bad as usual, and the country's treasury was so poor that it didn't even need to close its doors. There would definitely be a large-scale famine. Fortunately, after earning a huge sum of money from the Ottoman Empire, there wouldn't be many frozen corpses this winter. But even so, it was still painful to see the lives of the citizens who didn't have high expectations. When I met with a situation that I couldn't bear to see, even though I knew that it wouldn't be of much use and wouldn't solve the root of the problem, I would still extend my hand to help. Perhaps this can't change the fate of the entire country, but at least it can change the fate of the people in front of me. Along the way, I have received over 30 orphans with no one to rely on. If it wasn't for the fact that A. Lee was taken away by Warrior Clower, I might have taken her away with me. Of course, if there was a good child like A. Lee who made one's heart ache, there would naturally be no lack of tyrannical lords who bullied men and women, evil merchants who hoarded goods, and such people who made a fortune from a country's calamity. Whenever I meet with such a situation, I will secretly note it down and look for an opportunity to settle the score with them in the future. If they really go overboard, such as a certain domain lord using the right of first night as an excuse to extort and blackmail, causing the entire territory to be filled with complaints, I will not forget to carry out my duties as an executioner. Of course, at such a time, I will have to thank Renee for giving me the proof of being a royal envoy. That's great. The royal family is starting to punish the evil nobles. Since it was a death sentence, even if they would be brought to a fair trial, for the sake of the citizens who were still being bullied, it would be best to skip this middle procedure. Even though I was very careful, such rumors still spread like wildfire. On the contrary, for some reason, it increased the authority and prestige of the royal family. However, what was comforting was that perhaps the nobles who wanted to live a good life had already fled to other countries, or perhaps this country had a tradition of bestowing territories based on military achievements, or perhaps the extravagant and decadent lifestyle of the human nobles hadn't been completely spread here due to the remote northern lands. Most of the domain lords whose ancestors were commoners didn't say such nonsense as, since there's no rice, why not eat meat soup? They still haven't gotten rid of their natural earthy scent and are still carrying out the basic duty of protecting their citizens. Using the words of those noble, pure-blooded Ottoman true nobles who had been passed down for several hundred years, the so-called nobles in the northern lands are all barbarians who use their muscles to think. They still haven't gotten rid of their earthy farmer scent. However, if you ask me, compared to those so-called pure-blooded nobles who are obsessed with feasts, luxury goods, and hallucinogenic drugs, I still prefer these farmers and barbarians. At least they haven't forgotten their origins. At the very least, they are more like the ancient domain lords who pioneered the land, protecting their citizens from wild beasts and famine. When the royal family fell into a predicament due to the long war, most of the domain lords were still working hard to support this country. There were many who were diligent and loved their citizens. I have also seen many who spent their entire family fortune to help their citizens. Every time this happened, I couldn't help but sigh. When the citizens and domain lords didn't give up hope, it meant that the bones of this country weren't rotten yet. There was still hope. This was the good news that made me the happiest. No matter how difficult the external problems were, there were always ways to solve them. If even the bones were rotten, then there really was no hope. I had already promised little Ailey that I would change everything, but how to save her had become a huge problem in front of me. In this era where the citizens didn't have high expectations to maintain the stable development of a country, there were two basic prerequisites. The first was the supply of food, and the second was social security. These two were directly related to the most fundamental problem of survival. As for employment, business, education, and so on, those were of a higher level. The northern lands had never been a land that produced food, but it was rich in mineral resources. Exchanging mineral resources for food and daily necessities had been a habit for thousands of years. In the past, the Mist Kingdom stood tall in the north, while the current Donlon Principality was constantly losing land and was on the verge of collapse. This couldn't be blamed on the incompetence of the later generations of rulers. In reality, there was only one reason. If the country is strong, then the people are strong. If the country is weak, then the people are weak. It really is the sorrow of a weak country. With a slight comparison, the root of the problem could be seen. Back then, the Mist Kingdom was an awe-inspiring country. Even though it was a small country, it wasn't a weak one. The people of the country valued martial prowess, and they had many different kinds of Tier 3 troops. The lowest tier, 4 or a Knight, was renowned throughout the human world. Under the Royal Knight Order, there were 7 Ace Knight Orders. Any two of them were more than enough to sweep through the northern lands. That year, the powerful Mist Kingdom repelled the Beastmen and Elves to the north and sealed the Demon Abyss to the east. Furthermore, it was rich in mineral resources. Not to mention the threat of the Mist Kingdom's throat. The surrounding countries would take the initiative to trade with the Mist Kingdom every year. However, the current Donlon Principality could be said to have risen again after the fall of the Mist Kingdom. Most of its powerful troops had been lost, and its rich mineral resources had been taken over by other countries. Coupled with the accumulated grudges in its history, it had made many enemies. Faced with internal and external problems, it was only natural that it would grow weaker and weaker. A weak country yearns for prosperity. Perhaps Donlon's current weakness was also the reason why the Gemini Knight was viewed as the god of protection. Even though the Mist Kingdom still fell into its doom in the end, the story of how the Mist Kingdom single-handedly defeated a dozen allied armies and forced them to flee like rats was still being spread far and wide. Those powerful troops that had been lost became legends in the mouths of the men of Donlon. However, compared to the glory of the past, the current dismal state was even more depressing. Even though the tradition of martial prowess was still present, the current Donlon Principality had been reduced to a small third-rate country. With its current military prowess, not to mention ruling over the northern lands, it was hard for it to even protect its citizens from the beast hordes and ambitious neighboring countries. If we had sufficient rations and resources, Ailey's mother wouldn't have starved to death. If we had a stronger military prowess, even if we weren't able to hold a winter hunt like the Mist Kingdom and view the beast hordes as rare prey, at the very least, we would be able to control the scale of the beast hordes before winter. But at the very least, we would have been able to control the scale of the beast hordes before winter. At the same time, we wouldn't have been forced to migrate the entire city in the face of the beast hordes, causing little Ailey's father to die along the way. This was also the reason why I said that the aid to the individual is only a temporary solution and not a permanent solution. The rations that they extorted would run out sooner or later. Without sufficient military prowess, even if they managed to survive this winter's beast hordes, there would still be problems in the coming year. So if I want to turn everything around, what I had to do was very clear. Since the lack of rations and a weak army were the most important problems at the moment, then solving the issue of rations and strengthening the army was the first thing I had to do. This was the only way to solve the root of the problem. I already had a plan to strengthen the army, but the biggest problem now was still food. Rations, huh? This is going to be difficult. This barren frozen land was rich in minerals, but it wasn't suitable for crops to grow. It was possible to ask the mages to provide some temporary weather conditions, but the mages also needed materials to cast spells. If they were to do so on a large scale, no one would be able to afford the huge bill. Since it was difficult, I would look up the strategy guide. Of course, the history guide didn't have the answer to this question. I had to look up another book. Roland's Survival in a Different World booklet. The thick and tattered notebook was covered in dust. After being processed, the pages had already turned yellow. It could totally be sent to a museum as an ancient book with a new cover. This was a notebook that I had made when I first transmigrated to this world in order to prevent myself from forgetting the knowledge of another world. Considering that it might be useful this time, I had brought it with me. Making glass to sell for money. At the very front of the notebook were various ideas, but there were often annotations behind the ideas. Making glass was barely successful, but this idea was a failure from the very start. The alchemists had already invented an even more transparent glass in an accidental experiment. My efforts were in vain. Invented gunpowder. The gnomes have already invented it. Movable type printing. The god of knowledge relied on this to start his career. Behind the ideas in the notebook were all kinds of failures. The various annotations were all traces of my efforts and failures back then. If people were like their words, the immaturity and anger of these twisted words were so obvious. With just a little bit of knowledge from another world, I wanted to achieve great things in a real world. It seemed that the ambitious me back then was repeatedly beaten down by the harsh reality. But now wasn't the time to look back at the past. Thinking of my goal, I flipped to the page titled Food and was shocked once more. Got it. Solve the problem of food. Then I should plant high-yield and high-tolerance corn, sweet potatoes, hybrid rice. Using high-yield crops from another world to replace ordinary low-yield crops? This is really a good idea. Sighing, I closed the book and threw it harshly to the corner of the wall. Easy for you to say. Where can I find high-yield crops like corn in this world? Yes, this was the crux of the matter. If this world had such crops, there wouldn't have been famine a long time ago. It seemed that I was really unreliable back then. Although I know that the possibility isn't high, I should still give it a try. System, is it possible to exchange for these high-yield crops again? Yes. Initially, I didn't have any expectations for this question, but I actually received an affirmative answer. However, I was still unmoved. After all, I had already been scammed too many times. What conditions do I need? If it was that easy, I would have exchanged for them long ago. 10 million fate points for one crop. All right, as expected, it was such a scam. However, this time, I unexpectedly receive an explanation. As long as such high-yield crops appear, with the help of Drool and the mages, they will be able to change the entire world very quickly. In fact, they might even shake the feudal society that is based on land. It's impossible for you to pay for such a huge amount of karma. So this was the reason why I couldn't exchange for the crops. However, the system's explanation made me think of a possible way to obtain help. Looks like I should write a letter to Eaglestorm as well. It's true that we can't afford to hire the mages, but most countries view Drool as a dangerous individual. As long as we acknowledge their teachings, they shouldn't have any other requests. Since even the undead were willing to accept it, then Drool was naturally willing to accept it as well. Unlike the expensive mages, Drool didn't require any materials to cast divine arts. Making plants mature early was their specialty. However, it's still not enough. No matter how many Drool people there are, it won't be enough for a country. We still have to think of other ways. Notification, you still haven't realized it? The system is indeed unable to exchange for high-yield crops for you. But can't you create it yourself? Create it myself? My first thought was that the system was still scamming me. I only knew undead creation. It was possible for me to create a creature that would turn someone into an undead after eating it, but it was impossible for me to create a safe high-yield crop. Have you forgotten where you learned life structure theory from? She still has a deep impression of you. At that moment, I came to a realization. My undead creation theory was created by combining the knowledge of several different subjects. Many of the theories originated from the life structure theory of a certain great mage. If I didn't remember wrongly, that great mage specialized in the creation and summoning of plants. Perhaps it wasn't possible for her to create a high-yield crop that could change the world, but it shouldn't be difficult for her to create a cold-resistant crop for a small country in the north. Thus, I hesitated on how to write the second letter. That great mage was different from Eaglestorm. If it was possible, I didn't want to come into contact with her for the rest of my life. However, after thinking about it, I couldn't think of any other way. In the end, I could only start writing helplessly. Dear Senior Amelia, long time no see. Your junior has something to ask of you. No matter how long the journey was, it would come to an end one day. All of the preliminary work was completed, and the familiar capital, Definder, was finally in front of me. However, I fell into a state of worry. There was no reason for me to drag it any longer. Just as I was about to enter the city, I received a new piece of news and immediately turned the ship around. More than half an hour later, I found my target in a mountainous region about 20 kilometers southwest of Definder. It was a silent campsite with a bonfire burning silently. The cloaked figures in the campsite were silent and silent. The Church of Law led by Shuity has long entered the city and has already established a church to preach. As for Sir Ferdinand and the other undead knight, they are camped outside the city. This simple piece of news astonished me. After all, I understood Sir Ferdinand. He was extremely stubborn when it came to promises and military orders. Since I said that I wanted him and the undead knight to enter the city to teach those young knight of the new generation, he definitely wouldn't go easy on me. He should have entered the city long ago. However, the moment I alighted from the ship and saw the situation in the camp, I understood the reason. Originally, I thought that Ferdinand would bring 20 to 30 elite knight of various military types as instructors. Naturally, they would be able to easily sneak into the city. However, there were at least 300 black, cloaked figures resting in the camp. Not to mention sneaking into the city, there were more than 300 intelligent high-level undead, with at least 30 undead lords among them. They could summon an undead calamity at any moment and easily take down any city of the living. If news of them were to leak out, it would be impossible to hide or clean them up. What's going on with all of you? Didn't I say? Old Sir Ferdinand was the first to greet me. On the other hand, the skeleton old general showed an embarrassed expression. He knew that he didn't do things well. When everyone heard that we are heading to Definder, they all wanted to take a look. The number of people who signed up kept increasing. In the end, if it wasn't for Leader Bastion suppressing the situation and making adjustments to the number of people, I'm afraid that there would have been 5,000 to 6,000 of them. Looking around, Fade, Lucas, Timur, Slants, Lonnie, Kakana, the various Ace Knight were all here. When I looked at them, they felt a little embarrassed. I sighed helplessly. To think that you guys didn't get noticed along the way from the underground world? Forget it. It is a good thing that you guys are here. I happen to be in need of manpower. Resting in the day and traveling at night, searching for barren mountains. The other countries are a little troublesome, and there were a few small conflicts, but no one was hurt. On the other hand, the Mist Country is a familiar place, so no one should have noticed us yet. That's right, but since someone managed to sneak into the vicinity of the capital silently, this generation's Guardian Knight is too weak. All right, it is one thing for these fellows to easily sneak in, but to think that they would complain about the weak defense of the other party. Then, they should have entered the city, right? How do you feel? Even though it is impossible for a large group to enter the city, given their capabilities, it shouldn't be a problem for a dozen of them to enter. However, my question was met with an awkward silence. You guys, it can't be that you guys haven't entered the city all this while, right? Still silence. But this is already a form of tacit agreement. Even though we are clearly far away, we still want to take a look. But when we get close, we don't dare to enter. Fade's words received a wave of agreement. Perhaps This is another form of fear of returning home. But other than that, the undead knight has other concerns. After all, we are already undead, so we're on a different path from the living. Actually, I am already satisfied just by looking at it from afar. This generation's mist country doesn't seem to be in a good situation. If we were to get involved with the undead, we would probably be ostracized by the human society. Your Highness, our stubbornness has caused you trouble. Actually, we're already satisfied to be able to revisit our homeland. We have already discussed it, leaving behind 20 of us as instructors, while the rest return via the route we came from. Enough. An inexplicable anger made me interrupt the knight's self-pity. Have you all said enough? Are you all satisfied just by looking at it? Tell me loudly. You all traveled 1,000 miles and braved the dangers to pass through the borders of several countries just to look at it from afar? Are you all satisfied just like that? Are you all willing to return just like that? Do you think that I am a fool? Of course. Lucas swallowed his words after being glared at by me. He seems to be feeling a little guilty. The scene before me is extremely similar to that of Comisia and Fanderk. A few days ago, didn't they say the same thing as well? These few days have been enjoyable. There are still differences between the living and the dead. It is enough for us to just follow them. In reality, I know that no intelligent being would like to be alone, not to mention being treated as a different species. Since they are already enjoying themselves, then why should they stop this enjoyable interaction just because of how others view them? I also know that when facing the living, they are hesitant and fearful. They are worried that they will affect my plans, worried that I will be viewed as an enemy by the world because of them. After all, the mainstream view of this world is that the dead are evil. I can understand how this feeling of inferiority is born, but I have no intention of accepting it at all. Back then, you all died for the people of this land. Now, you all have returned to save them. You all are returning in glory, not cowardly deserters. You all have never owed anyone anything. Only this bastard world owes you all. Puff out your chests, my proudest knight. Put down those insignificant worries. Today is the day of your triumphant return. You all have sacrificed yourselves for this land. Returning to this homeland that you sacrificed everything to protect, what is there to hesitate about? What is there to be afraid of? Answer me. Why are you cowering? Do you all feel that you were wrong back then? Do you all regret it? Following my questioning, the 300 pairs of soul fires burned quietly in the dark night. Their emotions weren't calm at all. No, we have never regretted it. Even if we were to turn back time, we would still be willing to sacrifice everything for our homeland. But now, who would be willing to just look at the homeland of their dreams from afar? The knight has a clear conscience. Why must they suffer such a cruel fate? They are indeed afraid, but the one they are afraid of isn't a powerful enemy. On the battlefield, my knight never fears anything. I know that what they are afraid of now is. It is the people whom they sacrificed themselves for in the past. Yet, they're looking at them with hatred and enmity just because they are undead. Very well. Since you all have no regrets, what is there to hesitate about? Take off that boring cloak and follow me openly just like in the past. Please continue to trust me. I will give you all the glory and respect that you deserve. All of the undead knight take off their cloaks one by one. A black aura of death starts to spread, but I smile. Fearless and without regrets, this is my most adorable knight. Fade, my flag bearer. Are you ready? Yes, Your Highness. Raise the flag. Tell everyone that after 377 years, we have returned in triumph. The tall skeleton general carries the army flag on his back and starts to beat the war drum. The raising of the mist's war flag signifies the gathering of the indestructible army once again. Just like in the past, when the war horn blows and the army's flag flutters, the knight raises their weapons and march forward in formation. Since it is a triumphant return, how can there only be a single flag? Under my gaze, the knight also raises their flags. Among them, there is the emblem that represents the glory of the family, the army's flag that represents the honor of the army, and even the individual's flag that represents the military merit. To a knight, the war flag is his honor. Even if he loses his weapon, he will not lose his flag. The continuation of the family, the army's honor, and the individual's military merit. There are quite a few who carry 3 flags. Some might even carry more than 10 flags. However, he stubbornly intends to carry the war souls of his brothers on his back. Slance has 12 flags. Fandrik has 15. Barak has 20. Seta has 17. The skeleton of a knight holding the war flag trembles. It isn't because he is too timid, but because the war flag is too heavy. As the last flag bearer of an army, he is afraid that he will be shamed by the glory represented by the Snow Lion war flag. Edluan, his family has served in the Snow Lion Heavy Infantry Regiment for generations. Before the Battle of Definder, this regiment was attacked by a forbidden spell. Less than 100 survivors fought to their last drop of blood in the war that followed. There is also a knight who lost his and the army's final war flag in the war. However, he used the blood of the enemy to redraw his own glory. The war flag that he personally assembled was so shabby that no one could bear to look at it. However, none of his comrades ever mocked him. On the contrary, he was allowed to walk to the front of the army. His name is Timir. The Black Griffin Aerial Cavalry Regiment was completely annihilated, and not even their bones were left. Only he, as a dragon knight, responded to my summons and returned from hell. The war flag is the continuation of history. What it carries is the loyal bones under the mountains, the warriors who sacrificed their everything for this land. Every single flag is so tattered. Every single war flag represents the sacrifice and hot-bloodedness of countless warriors. Beneath every war flag are memories of blood and fire. The sun rises slowly in the distance. The last night breeze blows past, and these tattered war flags flutter along with the wind. Our defeated army has returned triumphantly. Play. The third movement of Ridstein's Great Victory, Triumphant Celebration. Accompanied by the sound of the horn was the triumphant march, which represented the return of victory. The banshees began to lead the singing in the softest and most cheerful rhythm. In the cheerful harmony, even the clumsy knights began to hum along with them. The joyous, triumphant march of the past echoes in our ears. The triumphant celebration of the past reappears in the eyes of the crowd. It is as though we have won countless times in the past and are preparing to return to the city to receive the cheers of our citizens. We are home. Chapter 130. The historical city of Definder, as the capital of the small country Donlon, was famous throughout the world. However, to visitors who visited it for the first time, it was inevitable that they would be disappointed. This city wasn't as majestic as the capital of other large countries. On the contrary, it was extremely dilapidated. Even to this day, there were still many abandoned buildings in the city. Ancient buildings were indeed worth researching and artistic value, but ancient ruins didn't have much sense of beauty. Even though it had the most majestic city walls and fortifications in the entire northern lands, as the population was far lower than its historical peak, only a third of the city was still in use. The city was still empty and sparsely populated. The Mist bloodline had guarded the northern lands for the entire human world for thousands of years, and this war-torn city had always been their capital. This ancient city had been through countless battles, and in the records of history, it had been massacred by the foreign races thrice. Yet, the people of the Mist rose up again and again, seizing back their cities time and time again to rebuild their capital. In the long river of history, what hurt them the most wasn't the barbaric invasion of the foreign races, but the dagger in their back, which almost turned this impregnable historical city into ruins. AD 1520, after defending for 15 months, under the exhaustion of food and ammunition, the final capital of the Mist country, Definder, was breached by the allied armies of the human race. Prince Roland led all the defending troops and died in the city. In the history books, this was a simple record without any head or tail, but to the Mist people, it was the most unforgettable hatred. Back then, the Church of the God of Holy Light's Pope, Paul IX, gathered together 17 countries to form an allied army. While the Mist Kingdom's main army was fighting against the Beastmen in the north and the demons in the east, they viciously stabbed, the Mist Kingdom in the back. After that, they massacred the entire city, directly turning Definder into a land of death. After that, the undead knight who went on a rampage for revenge, and the demon army that Prince Cavendish brought in, caused the fall of the 17 countries to become history. It caused the entire human world to suffer the most painful loss in history. The Church of Holy Light can't be trusted, and those damned human kingdoms and nobles even more so. This was the oath that the Mist people engraved in their bloodline after being betrayed for the past 300 years, and it was exactly what they did after that. 200 years ago, the self-proclaimed descendant of Roland, the founding monarch of the Donglan Principality, chased away the beastmen occupying their homeland, bought back a portion of the land from the elves, and rebuilt the Mist Country. In order to dispel the land of the dead and re-establish the capital in Definder's original location, Seal requested the Holy Church's assistance. Even though the Pope of that generation spent a great deal of effort to restore the land of the dead to the land of the living, the Mist citizens' attitude towards the Holy Church only improved slightly. Their attitude towards the Holy Church went from throwing stones at their backs to sneering at them to their faces. The Mist citizens only allowed the Holy Church to establish a branch here, and this was only because Prince Roland was a holy knight. Of course, with the Church of Holy Light as the main religion in the human world, the Mist country's unfriendliness towards other countries and the Holy Church naturally led to them being isolated in the human world once more. This was also one of the main reasons for their gradual decline. However, the stubborn Northlanders never regretted it, since they were already barbarians among the civilized people. So what if they were a little more vengeful and barbaric? Compared to the gods who sat high above the clouds, they believed more in the sharp swords in their hands and the protection of their ancestors. However, in the harsh reality of being surrounded by enemies and countless wars, the newly born Mist Country seemed to have reached its end once more. However, there was one person who didn't think so. He intended to turn this desperate situation around with the new Mist bloodline. And today, it was destined to be recorded in history. At the first light of dawn, the citizens who were still in a deep sleep were awoken by the cheerful victory march. The sound of horse hooves from the palace all the way to the gates of the city swiftly woke up the ancient city. A red carpet was laid at the city gates. The royal guards of honor and musicians started to play music. The royal knights started to line up, and the guards on the city walls started to scatter rainbow-colored petals. This was the prelude to a triumphant return, and it was the most popular season for everyone. However, it was a pity that the most recent victory was a year ago, when both sides were heavily injured from the war with the Beastmen. The joyous news of victory was covered by the shadow of the king's death. Upon hearing this victory march, the citizens excitedly walked out of their homes. As they walked towards the city gates, they discussed among themselves. Triumphant return? There hasn't been any war recently. Could it be that the knights have gone out to hunt beasts? Are you dumb? Princess Renee's diplomatic mission this time around was so successful. The rewards she reaped from it are comparable to any other war. I see. Has Princess Renee returned? Looking at the time, it's about time. The Ottoman convoy had arrived earlier than the princess. A large number of resources had returned earlier than the princess. Joyous crowds filled both sides of the road. They were waiting for the princess to return, hoping to welcome and thank her as soon as possible. Amidst the creaking sounds of gears, when the heavy city gate was gradually opened, the first figure that entered stunned everyone. Princess? That can't be right. His face was extremely similar to the princess, but there were many obvious differences. Princess Renee wasn't this tall, and her face wasn't this mature. Most importantly, the old-fashioned ice armor was obviously a male style. This was a young man with a smile on his face. So familiar, but I can't remember. Statue of the Twin Stars. Yes, if His Highness Roland were to live to this age, he would probably look like this. How similar. That posture, that smile on his face, and that Roland's sacred sword at his waist. Wait a minute, Roland's sacred sword. In sculptures and paintings, this symbol of royalty was so eye-catching. There wasn't a single person in the Mist Kingdom who would forget the appearance of this sword. Furthermore, the faint silver glow on the sword was similar to the one recorded in the legends. Similarly, in history, it was this sword that fell together with Prince Roland. While the citizens were cheering for the Roland sacred sword, the royal knight had only received the preparations for a triumphant return. Naturally, they were also in a heated discussion. When a knight behind the man walked through the city gates, everyone was astonished. That familiar war flag was tattered. Under the fluttering war flag, the undead knight walked openly into the sunlight. Before the royal knight drew his sword, with the help of a voice transmission spell, the man's declaration echoed throughout the entire city. I, Holy Knight Roland, the last ruler of the Mist Kingdom, have returned together with my knight. The red carpet beneath my feet wasn't considered high-class goods. As a country welcoming guests, it could be considered shabby. However, stepping on it and looking at the Mist citizens before me, I felt an indescribable sense of happiness. The undead knight stepped into the city. At this stage, the battle-hardened undead knight had already given up on their doubts. The blazing soul fire displayed their unshakable will. Yes, what was there for them to hesitate about? What was there for them to fear? It was just a triumphant return. Even if their bodies had changed, how could their wandering hearts change? Following closely behind me through the city gates was Renee, who was riding on Frigid Maw. Her appearance with a smile effectively eased the tense atmosphere caused by the undead. Princess Renee? What is that? That dazzling white mount? Frigid Maw? That's the legendary Aurora Knight. I never thought that I would be able to see the legendary Aurora Knight. Could that person really be Prince Roland? While Donlon was astonished by the reappearance of Frigid Maw and cheered for their knight princess becoming a legendary Aurora Knight, the next scene caused everyone to suck in a breath of cold air. This made the title of Prince Roland even more prominent. 54 Frigid Maw Knight stepped through the city gates in an orderly manner. Even though the appearance of the knight had changed beyond recognition, the ice armor engraved on the murals and sculptures wouldn't lie. The soul mount that was covered in ice was a trademark of the Mist Kingdom in the past. More importantly, the 54 fluttering Aurora war flags indicated their identity. The Aurora Knight Squadron. It's the Aurora Knight Squadron, the legendary knight squadron that was said to be undefeatable over 100 knights. That's the Mist Kingdom's proudest sword. It's the unstoppable cold light cavalry that swept across the northern lands. For so many years, whenever Donlon was bullied, the citizens of the Mist Kingdom couldn't help but recall the glory of the past. Is the Alchemist Knight that amazing? Is the Beastman Wolf Knight that amazing? If our Aurora Knight Squadron was still around, how could we have allowed those shameless brats to act so arrogantly? Words of regret. When their Knight Squadron was defeated countless times due to the disparity in equipment, the resentment and anger were passed down from generation to generation, eventually settling into sighs of helplessness and despair. Sometimes, they had no choice but to accept the reality that their country was no longer strong. The Mist Kingdom that dominated the world with its Knight Squadron has become a weak country without any powerful troops. A while ago, there was indeed a rumor that Princess Renee had displayed her prowess as an Aurora Knight in the Ottoman Empire. However, to the citizens of the Mist who knew about the history of Frigid Maw, they knew that it was impossible and treated it as just another rumor. Sigh, if only it were true. If only we had an Aurora Knight, we wouldn't have been suppressed. At this moment, among the undead Aurora Knight Squadron, Princess Renee, whom the citizens were familiar with, stood out. The unicorn Frigid Maw beneath her proved that all of this wasn't just a rumor. The Aurora Knight had returned to the world. Is it the princess who brought back our pride, the strongest Aurora Knight in the Northern Lands? It's the knight, Captain Eloin. He has also become an Aurora Knight. The heavens bless the Mist Kingdom. We have an Aurora Knight again. We are no longer a weak, third-rate country. Perhaps the Aurora Knight Squadron wasn't the strongest among my Knight Squadron. However, to the citizens of the Mist, it was the symbol of the Mist Kingdom's golden age. It was the treasure that they hoped to possess once again. Placing the undead Aurora Knight Squadron at the forefront, along with Renee and Eloin, not only weakened the citizens' hostility toward the undead, it was also sufficient for the citizens to form the associations that I had hoped for. Could that man really be Prince Roland? Could it be that these undead are the final aurora from the fallen lands of Definder? Under my encouraging gaze, Renee, as the host, also knew what she had to do. The young female knight stepped out of the ranks and welcomed the citizens who were still hesitating. She took the Roland's sacred sword from me and made a vow that would leave her name in the annals of history. I, Renee Cheen Mist, a descendant of the Mist royal family, have found my ancestor, Prince Roland, and his knight squadron in order to strengthen our country once more. From now on, our aurora will shine in the northern lands once more. With the help of His Highness and his loyal royal knight squadron, our Donglan Principality will rise once more. Perhaps some might be worried because of their identity as undead. However, I swear on my honor and life that they're the most trustworthy existences. Citizens, I know that you will be worried and apprehensive. After all, they have already turned into undead. However, back then, they used their lives to protect their city. Even if they were to die, they would avenge their enemies. Now, even if they have turned into undead, even if their souls were to be destroyed, they still chose to help us. What is there to doubt about such Knight Squadron? With the help of a sound amplification magic, the declaration of the young princess spreads across the entire city. That clear and bright voice reverberates throughout the entire city. Before this, the radiance of the royal sacred sword had already ignited the passion of the citizens. The Roland's sacred sword, the Holy Knight Roland, and the Royal Knight Squadron have really returned. Her Highness has found the lost royal sacred sword and the Knight Squadron. Facing the excited citizens, Renee pauses for a moment before continuing. Perhaps their current faces are frightening, but you can look at their armor and weapons with their family emblems. Look at the Mist war flag that has experienced countless battles. The will of the Mist will never yield, and the Mist war flag will never fall. Even if they're already dead, they still have a reason to protect their country. Isn't this the embodiment of the will of the Mist? You don't trust such a Knight Squadron. What else do you intend to trust? Do you believe in the holy light that has no proof? Due to the lack of time, I didn't manage to teach Renee what to say. Looking at the impassioned Renee, who is filled with sincerity, I couldn't help but smile in relief. Just as Rain was giving her speech, the sky suddenly darkened. A gigantic beast streaked across the sky, causing countless people to sigh in amazement. Bone Dragon? No, there's someone up there. He actually jumped down. That's a Bone Dragon Knight. The moment Timir landed on the ground, he raised the familiar black Griffin war flag. I knew that since the Roland's sacred sword and Renee had already proven my identity, it was time for me to say something. Timir, the last Dragon Knight of the Mist Country. In the aerial battle of Scott, our Black Griffin aerial squadron was surrounded and attacked by enemies that outnumbered us 5-1. In order to cover the retreat of our ground troops, the Black Griffin aerial squadron fought a bloody battle, and eventually, the entire squadron was annihilated. Timir himself even managed to kill 2 of them under the joint attack of 3 Dragon Knights. Even though I intentionally maintained a calm tone, my words still caused countless exclamations of shock. Without a doubt, dragons are at the top of the food chain. An ultimate unit like the Dragon Knight Squadron is something that only the most powerful empires can possess. The current Donglan Principality doesn't even dare to think about it. According to historical records, the Mist Country did have several Dragon Knight squadrons in the past. I didn't expect that I would actually be able to cross the river of history and meet them. Our aerial squadron is made up of a bunch of good lads. However, due to the extreme cruelty of the aerial duels, the losers were left with nothing left of them. Even though the aerial squadron is made up of the elites of the Mist Country, only Timir responded to my summons and dealt a second blow to those damned invaders. After bowing, the proud last Dragon Knight Squadron waved the Black Griffin war flag and led the way on the red carpet of victory, as though he was a warrior who had returned victorious. No, he was indeed a warrior who had returned victorious. This is our knight, the evil undead? No, we are just a bunch of fools who are unwilling to accept the beautiful Mist Country being occupied by the invaders and have returned from hell once more. After Timur and the Aurora Knight squadron advanced together, the survivors of the various armies entered the city next. As for me, I started to look back on history. The Polar Bear Squadron and the Royal Heavy Infantry Squadron. These two squadrons were mixed together at the end of the war. Equipped with the Avalanche Defender armor, they were our strongest barrier and fortress. Now, after going through countless battles, there are only 16 of them left. Among them, the strongest is also the youngest. That is Carlos Dice. I nodded my head proudly and introduced one of my most trusted knight squadrons to the world, my most reliable moving wall. In order to protect the fleeing citizens, he used his flesh and blood to block the stone bridge, using his body as a target to hold back the butcher's knife of the invaders. Back then, he was struck by over 100 arrows and died. His blood flowed dry, and not a single bone was left intact. In the end, he could only be resurrected as an abomination. That year, the Guardian Knight Carlos Dice, who made me so proud, was only 15 years old. It is hard to imagine how an abomination would reveal such a shy expression. But at this moment, Carlos is nodding his head shyly towards the citizens. His smile remains the same, just like when he was young. Asthma Hound Tamer. You might not have heard of them before. They are our special ranger unit, and the representative of them is our heroic scout, Long Wind Knight. Even though it is a conventional dragon spear knight, it is still the main force of our Mist Country's army. Slants. Oh, this is the great sword Saint Fade. I believe you must have heard of the great name of the number 1 sword saint of the Royal Knight Squadron. Of course, the prerequisite is that you have heard of his father. This old knight Ferdinand has no intention of undermining us. This is, one by one, the names of the knight are called out. Along with the identity and past of the undead knight being revealed, the unyielding history of the undead knight enters the eyes of the citizens. Only then do they realize that these repulsive undead knight were once the legendary heroes of the Mist Country. Based on the traditions of the Northlanders, since they were heroes of noble character when they were alive, they should be trustworthy and worthy of respect even after death. Since the unknown will bring about fear, then let me dispel these unknowns. As long as they don't have any sins on their bodies, even if they have turned into undead, the loyal and powerful knight will only make me proud. There is nothing to hide. But obviously, there is someone who doesn't think so. Darned undead, how dare you come to the world of the living? Even a loose golden robe is unable to hide his huge belly. As the Archbishop of the Holy Church of the Donlon Diocese, under the protection of a circle of holy knight and priests, Archbishop Lop finally arrives at the scene. His panting might be the main reason why the Holy Church took so long to arrive. Just like how the Justice Knight wouldn't let off a sinner who went against God's laws, the Holy Church on the surface wouldn't let off any evil, undead, especially since the undead actually dared to openly enter the city. This is basically a provocation to the holy light and the source of order. Under their fervent belief, even though there is a huge disparity in their combat strength, the Holy Knight ranks forward with the priests behind them. They are in a battle formation, ready to fight at any moment. Their arrival was within my expectations, even later than I expected, and I have long since prepared a plan to deal with them. Why do I remember that this is already the land of law? Isn't the Holy Church interfering a little too far? My question causes old Lop to pause for a moment. Obviously, the fact that the Church of Law has become the national religion of Donlon means that his mission to spread the Church of Law is a complete failure. At the same time, the person I am waiting for has also arrived. Hey, old Lop, don't go overboard. The Donlon Principality has already established our Lord's faith as the national religion. This is already the land of law. Don't you think that you are going overboard by committing murder in front of me, the highest bishop of the God of Law? Shuadi has also arrived. The moment he appears, he winks at me mischievously. Behind him is a familiar face. That familiar silver mask is filled with the radiance of the power of law. It seems that following Wumian's ascension to godhood, they have become much stronger. the highest tyrant bishop. The Church of Law, which arrived 2 months earlier than us, has already officially entered Dongwon. The citizens are also used to this kind tyrant bishop. Now that the Church of Law has arrived, they stand between us and the Holy Church. Obviously, they intend to stop the conflict between both sides. Damn it, they are evil undead. They are the enemies of all order. Why are they stopping us? Bishop Lop, in front of our Lord, there's only guilty and innocent. Please don't use race to differentiate between good and evil. Right now, I only see that you are intending to commit murder. This is the holy land of the Church of Law. Do you really think that we are just decorations? But they are still undead. They are bloodthirsty and chaotic. Even if they were heroic figures in the past, can you guarantee that the current them won't harm others out of instinct? The undead are infamous. The middle-aged holy knight's roar resonates through the air, following which the citizens start to hesitate. Shuedi, on the other hand, laughs. Of course I can. In the name of the highest bishop of the God of Law, I can guarantee that they're the true, undying Valkyrie and not vengeful spirits controlled by bloodlust. They have lived in Lu Huang Mountain City for more than 100 years, and not a single murder case has occurred. Not long ago, they were the ones who killed the demon count. That was a great battle that can be said to be epic. On the contrary, your holy knight is always creating trouble in the name of eradicating evil. What a headache. The highest bishop of the God of Law has a noble status. From a certain perspective, he is an existence equivalent to the Pope of the Holy Church, Sinkelo III. At this moment, Shuidi's words resound through the air, and the surrounding exclamations of shock can be heard. Looking at the relaxed and excited expressions of the citizens, his guarantee seems to have worked. You, damned evil underground man, you are all in the same group. You are all villains. How could I guarantee it? The Bishop of Holy Light just roars furiously, but he hurriedly covers his mouth. However, he is unable to retract his words. This is a serious personal attack. Are you sure? You actually dare to insult the highest bishop of a true god as a villain? Also, I can't pretend that I didn't hear that discrimination. This is a serious insult to the entire Church of Law. I will lodge a serious protest to Sinkelo III. It isn't easy to make up for a slip of the tongue in such a public place. Just as Shuedi is about to pursue the matter, even though I know that it isn't suitable for me to do so, I still stand up. Villain? Who is the villain? It is time for me to spit out some things. Luo Fu, you're the inheritor of Cardinal Luo Fu's bloodline? Fine, from a certain perspective, I, who was a holy knight 300 years ago, can be considered as your senior. Then, let's talk about who is the villain here. Findar Jane, you should have heard of this name, right? The moment I finish my words, the sweat on the forehead of Luo Fu the Thinker starts to drip. As the future successor of the Cardinal, Luo Fu knows quite a bit about that taboo history. You can't answer? Of course, that was an unfair trial that brought shame to the entire Church of Holy Light. Those who believe in the Holy Light are executed as villains and heretics, while the true villain sits high up on the bench of the trial. Is this the justice and fairness of your Church of Holy Light? Under my questioning, the pale-faced Death Knight walks over slowly. In the eyes of those who are in the know, his face is no different from the historical records. Everyone, just as His Highness Roland has mentioned, I was once a holy knight. However, because I refused to testify according to the words of the exiled cardinal, I was executed in the square of Holy Light. No, that's not it. No, I don't know. Then, can you swear in the name of the Holy Light? If one swears in the name of the Holy Light, if it turns out to be a lie, it is equivalent to betraying the Holy Light forever. How can Cardinal Luo Fu, whose ultimate goal is to become the Pope, make such a vow? Even if he doesn't make such a vow, his awkward silence, pale face, and the beads of sweat dripping from his forehead are enough to explain everything. In an instant, an uproar breaks out. Not only are the citizens shocked and furious, even the holy knight and priest, who were intending to sacrifice themselves for the church, are filled with disbelief. The current reputation of the Church of Holy Light is rather good. but that doesn't mean that it doesn't have a dark past. However, if one were to bury their sinful past, how would they have the confidence to represent the holy light to punish evil? Looking at their ugly, cowering appearance, I laughed, but it was a laugh of extreme anger. I swear in the name of the holy light that the reason why the calamity back then developed to such an extent can all be traced back to the evil and filthy higher-ups of the Church of Holy Light. That so-called holy war is nothing more than a bunch of greedy hyenas led by lions. You bunch of hypocrites, using the name of the holy war as a pretext, but acting as bandits. You are the true source of all evil. Look at me. You bunch of villains still have the face to use the holy light. My wings spread open, giving off a blinding holy light and holy flames. The boundless power of the holy light is the best proof of the veracity of my words. I'm also a holy knight, but I've never believed in the God of holy light, nor will I listen to that laughable church of holy light. I only believe in the justice of the holy light itself. The holy light has never ordered us to kill the innocent. Knight, do you think that your own justice can be determined by the teachings of the Church of Holy Light? Then, who will be the guarantor of the Church of Holy Light's justice? Perhaps your self-righteous eradication of evil is just a form of killing the innocent in the name of justice. As a war angel, in the teachings of the Church of Holy Light, I am the messenger of a true God. Under my angry glare, that pure holy light is an interrogation of conscience and faith. Most of the holy light users present begin to waver. And when these questions spread throughout the entire world, a new division within the Church of Holy Light is born. The idea of purely believing in the holy light and maintaining a distance from the Church of Holy Light becomes the most painful and embarrassing division for the cardinals. But at this moment, at this critical moment, when Lofu is being forced to retreat step by step and is making a fool of himself, when the citizens of the Mist Kingdom are looking at the Church of Holy Light in an increasingly unfriendly manner, that middle-aged Holy Knight captain would stand out once again. The Church of Holy Light today is no longer the Church of Holy Light from 300 years ago. We have been constantly improving. It's meaningless to talk about the past now. What's important right now is whether or not the undead are a threat to the living. Archbishop Shueti, are you admitting that you came from the same place as them? I remember that your tribunal has a system of automatic dismissal. Then, according to your logic, since you are related to them, then your testimony is naturally invalid. Without a doubt, this is a way to change the topic. Furthermore, it is a malicious misinterpretation of the teachings of the God of Law. Is this the tribunal? A guarantor and a witness's testimony are two different things. According to your logic, the guarantor can't be related to the person being guaranteed. Then, doesn't that mean that there is no one who can be a guarantor? Looking at this malicious misinterpretation, Shueti is infuriated. Just as he is about to reprimand the other party, a familiar voice rings in his ears. Then, can I be a guarantor? That was a red-haired warrior who had been standing in the middle of the crowd. Even though his lazy voice was filled with cynicism and surprise, there was an inexplicable might under the ordinary appearance of the red-haired warrior that made the Holy Knight captain would feel fear instinctively, would had even used honorifics on the warrior. You are Adam Hahn, Red Lotus Sword Saint, as well as Roland's close brother and the previous city lord of Sulphur Mountain City. Do you want us to withdraw as well? The Red Lotus Sword Saint is the strongest candidate for the position of the human race. His undying achievement of ending the Yongya calamity has made him a living legend and a saint. In front of him, even the current pope is considered as a junior. Marguerite, Saint Arleden's truth overseer candidate. I have been with the Undead Knight for close to 200 years. I trust them and am willing to use my reputation to vouch for them. The moment the great saint descends from the sky, that solemn vow echoes throughout the entire city. The trust in him is deeply etched in people's memories. Representing the will of my Lord, I can vouch for them as well. This time, the voice comes from the sky as well. However, that familiar male voice with an elven accent reminds me of an acquaintance that I just parted with not too long ago. Basra, as expected, The one descending along with the light of order is the envoy of a true God. Hearing these famous names, Wood's back is drenched in sweat. At this moment, he is still hoping that it is just a coincidence that they share the same name. Lady Moonlight's Valkyrie, loaned to Basra? Yes, but she is Wumian's Valkyrie now. We will settle the score for your misinterpretation of the God of Law's teachings later. Now, 2 semi-gods and a Valkyrie vouch for you. Is that enough? The questioning of Valkyrie and the epic hero leaves Wood speechless. Just when he thinks that he is too weak to reply, I want to reason with him instead. All right, let's not talk about the past. Then, let's talk about the present and the future. 300 years ago, you destroyed the Mist Country with groundless reasons, leading to the calamity of the demons that lasted for 16 years, causing the entire human world to suffer the most painful calamity. And now this calamitous country is once again in a desperate situation. But what do you intend to do? You say that you are protecting the human society from the invasion of evil. But from what I see, your holy church is the source of all evil. We are guiding people to do good. The holy church is the source of all evil? This is a question that I have never heard before. Shocking Wood. Following which, fear comes from the bottom of his heart. In that instant, facing the endless dark history and the furious accusations of the victims, he, who is skilled in eloquence, is actually unable to find any words to respond. Believing in the Holy Church means doing good? What a joke. The moral conduct of my knights is 100 times nobler than those pigs in the Holy Church who wear the clothes of an archbishop. For so many years, my people are on the verge of starving to death, but I don't see the Holy Church doing anything decent. Fine, the Holy Light doesn't care about me, but why? When I return with my knights, intending to let my people live a decent life, you jumped out. You say that this is unacceptable. That is unacceptable. Are you happy when you see this country being destroyed again and its people starving to death? The furious questioning leaves the other party at a loss for words. Suddenly, a small pebble knocks on Wood's head. That is a little girl venting her anger. Batty, don't bully Big Brother Knight. While Wood is stunned, under the relentless questioning, when the hatred of his country is brought to the light, the surrounding citizens are already furious. At this moment, the little girl's blow is only the initial fuse, following which, the furious roars of the Mist citizens cause more and more pebbles, rotten eggs, and other household rubbish are hurled over. Finally, under my questioning, when the dark history of the past is dragged to the light, the dissatisfaction of the people of the Mist against the Holy Church finally erupts. Murderers, get out of the Mist Kingdom. You villains and bullies, don't you know shame? Kesha of the Almond family, Ruhr of the whatever Cole family, if you are still a citizen of the Mist, take off your ugly priest robes. Come back to us. Under the agitation of the masses, facing the furious elders of their hometown, the people of the Mist who joined the Holy Church can no longer stay. Perhaps the influence that the Holy Church has planted in Donglan over the years will be swept clean. While the Holy Church is being questioned and even expelled, my knights are destined to receive the respect they deserve in the future due to their heroic past. At this moment, I don't have the leisure to be surprised by these small matters. The gift that Basra brought to me by Wumians is destined to shock the world. God Power Forbidden Spell, City of Sinless. This is a generous gift that our Lord Wumians has bestowed upon this city and country. In this world, only you, Lord Roland, are qualified to use it. How can the Order gods allow the City of Rain to enjoy the limelight? Perhaps only I know what I am thinking in my heart. This gift is indeed what I need the most. With it, the gap between the living and the dead will be shortened swiftly. After hesitating for a moment, I finally made up my mind. I, the God of Law, Wumians, hereby declare that under my will, the capital of Donglan, Definder, shall become the holy land of the law, the City of Sinless. When I tore open the God Power scroll, a mysterious God Power took control of my words. Then, the voices of the mortals and the true gods in the world fused into one. This is the declaration of a true God. The entire world has to listen to my will. In this city, No one will be punished because of their identity, race, or status. Before the law of God, every intelligent being has the right to live freely. If anyone were to violate the law of God in this city, regardless of their identity, status, or race, they will be judged as a sinner by the eternal judgment spell. My believers are free to judge their sins. The incantation had ended here, but strangely, when I moved my lips, there was more content to the incantation. In my city, the undead do not represent evil, and the holy light does not represent justice. Before the law of God, everyone is equal. Only the most heinous sins must be punished. Chapter 131. I, the God of Law, Womians, hereby declare that under my will, the capital of Donglan, Definder, shall become the holy land of the Law faction, a land without sin. Under the will of a true God, all mortals must remain humble. When the God's declaration came down from the clouds, even the angriest holy knight or priest had to stop all disputes. The true God in the clouds displayed his divine might. Countless pillars of light descended, and the silver light of law illuminated the entire world. The originally dilapidated buildings were covered in a layer of faint silver fluorescence, and the entire city appeared solemn and dignified. The golden scroll contained the divine power of the God of Law. Without a doubt, this was a country-level, perpetual, tactical forbidden spell. As the scroll was torn apart, the overflowing power of law turned me into the medium of this forbidden spell, replacing the God of Law to release this super forbidden spell. However, outside of the declaration, I added my own commentary. Can sunlight exist by itself without the aid of night? Is there no shadow on the other side of the holy light? In my city, the undead do not represent evil, and the holy light does not represent justice. Before the God's laws, everyone is equal. Only the most heinous sins must be punished. Two souls of the same origin resonated with each other. In the end, Womians, who had no sense of self, gave up on the right to operate. Mawa made some changes to the original declaration. When the true God's declaration resounded throughout the entire world, even I was unable to predict what this huge change would lead to and what changes my sudden addition to the declaration would cause. At the very least, in the eyes of the other Holy Church job classes, the God of Law's suggestion that there may be shadows on the other side of the holy light and that the holy light does not represent justice was basically a slap to the face. Even though they were both in the Order faction, the God of Law was destined to become the number one enemy of the God of Holy Light in the eyes of all the Holy Light job classes. However, they were unable to criticize him face to face. After all, he was also a true God of the Order faction. From a certain standpoint, he was in existence on the same level as the God of Holy Light, and the Holy Church was only an earthly servant and representative of the Holy Light Church in name. Although there was a lot of exaggeration in his words, it was still rude for a servant to criticize his master's companion. What does Womians mean by this? Is he going to start a civil war between the Order gods? Servants couldn't do anything to an unwelcome guest, but the master could scold the guest for his rudeness. Everyone was waiting for the God of Holy Light to respond, but there was no response. All right then, these two true gods were existences without any sense of self. They would only act according to their own logic in order to expand their own worshippers. My declaration didn't have any intention of directly criticizing them. All I said was that there might be shadows, but that doesn't represent justice. This was the truth, and the God of Holy Light's pure logic wouldn't judge it as an attack. In the God of Holy Light's way of thinking, this had nothing to do with him, so he naturally wouldn't respond. Perhaps in the eyes of those who understand the secrets of the gods, this is just an insignificant little trick. They might even be suspicious of how Womians, who has also lost his sense of self, is able to play such a word game. However, in the eyes of most mortals, this is equivalent to the magnanimous God of Holy Light tacitly agreeing to the words of the God of Law. There might be villains hiding under the cover of Holy Light, and there might be shadows behind the Holy Light. Perhaps the Holy Church isn't that holy, and just after all, Perhaps this is what most people think, and in the eyes of the world, the God of law and the God of holy light will definitely start to stand on opposite sides. At the very least, the most direct result of this declaration is that the Holy Church will probably have more thoughts about the law job classes. However, since the Holy Church intended to poach talent from the very start and even replace the holy light in the future, this level of hostility is within expectations. On the contrary, this kind of external hostility can even cause the law job classes to unite. As the caster of this forbidden spell, I already understand the effects of this forbidden spell. Under the effects of this divine power forbidden spell, which is on the same level as the city of rain, the light of law will forever envelop this city. As long as someone commits a serious crime in this city that triggers the God's law, the highest level judgment spell will turn the person's entire body bright red for at least 24 hours. Then, the law enforcers who hear the news will arrive to judge the person. In the guiltless city, any tragic crime will immediately be exposed to the light of day. When a serious crime can't be avoided, it probably won't be long before the ideal of the guiltless city becomes a reality. If Sulphur Mountain City is the holy land of the law faction, then Definder is destined to become the land of miracles and rise to power for the law faction. From today onwards, the law faction and the Donlon Principality will probably be inextricably linked. At this moment, the agitated crowd was attacking the Holy Church's group. I signaled to Shiwedi with my eyes to stop the crowd from attacking the Holy Church. Under the gaze of our Lord Womians, no villains can hide. Although the Holy Church has made many mistakes in the past, the people in front of us are innocent. Please let them leave. After the miracle, the status of the Church of Law, which has just become the national religion of Donlon, will rise even higher. As the highest bishop of the Church of Law, Old Cow will undoubtedly become one of the top 3 authoritative figures in this country. In such a situation, his words will naturally have an effect. Bishop Lofu, staying here will only worsen the conflict. Please leave as soon as possible. If you still want your face, please leave this city as soon as possible. If you insist on staying, please don't die in this city, so as not to increase our workload. Shiwedi insults the Church of Law while leading his people to help him out of his predicament. Under the Church of Law support, the moment a gap appears in the crowd, that venerated regional bishop runs off first, not even bothering about his own guards and the priests under him. That's enough. It'll be troublesome if the bishop dies here. Based on their personality, it's entirely possible that they'll make it sound like the God of Law colluded with the undead and some bishop died in the line of duty. Looking at him now, he's scared out of his wits and will probably lead his troops to leave soon. It'll be even better if the Holy Church gives up on the Northlands because of this. Sigh, with their tyrannical style of doing things, it's unlikely that they'll give up completely. It seems like there'll be more to be learned in the future. The departure of the antagonist caused the crowd to cheer for their victory. When the unhappy, uninvited guest left, the horn of victory sounded again, and the triumphant marching song started playing again. Under the war flag, the knight's triumphant march begins once more, just that it's different from the silent march earlier. This time, when the ancient heroes return in triumph, the citizens also join in the march. With the guarantee of several epic heroes and the descent of the power of God, the barrier between the living and the dead is finally broken. That one-man show that was forced to hold on has come to an end. Even if there's still some worry and hesitation, there's finally a cheering crowd beside the ancient knight who is returning home. The original solemnity is nowhere to be seen. When the living join in the parade, the entire parade begins to be filled with joy and joy. The elderly try to ask the knight about the difference between their past and real history. The middle-aged try to leave their impression in front of the knight. The youngsters look at the unyielding figures of the mist knight with reverence and ask if it's possible for them to become one of them. As for the naughty children, they secretly crawl over to touch the ice-cold swords and show off their bravery to their companions. The Aurora Knight squadron walking at the front becomes the hardest hit. That beautiful ice armor attracts the attention of the women and children. That legendary past makes every man yearn for it. But at this moment, while they're happy in their hearts with a straight face, they still have to explain the dangers of the ice armor and warn the citizens not to touch it, especially in case of the sudden attacks of the naughty children. Most of the other Knight Squadron is the same, but what leaves the deepest impression is the strange way they recognize each other. The emblem on this flag, could it be that you're my ancestor? You're my younger sister's descendant? You really do look like one. Lord, if you have the time, can you come to our family? My children should be interested in hearing your story. Of course, I'll go after the parade. Everyone, look, I have descendants, I have a family, I'm not alone anymore. This kind of situation is not uncommon. After receiving a positive answer, the living will be envied by the other citizens, while the dead will be so happy that they forget themselves, proudly showing off their descendants to their companions. Of course, most of them are the descendants of their brothers. And those who don't have descendants secretly make up their minds to check on the civil affairs of this place later on to see if they have any blood-related descendants or distant relatives who have changed their names. At the very least, they can support a new family of their own. The cold exterior is a wall. The undead knight is used to using the cold exterior to isolate their inner heart. But at this moment, this wall is smashed to pieces, revealing the softest part of the knight's heart. There are quite a few who are so moved that they forget themselves. I have even seen 2 skeleton generals who laughed so hard that their lower jaw fell off. In my eyes, even a man of steel like Casimius, when a young lady puts a flower garland on the head hanging on his waist, his flustered response and his cross-eyed look revealed his emotions and his nature as a century-old bachelor. Should I be thankful that the undead are unable to shed tears? Otherwise, judging from the stirring soul undulations of the brothers, the uncontrollable tears of gratitude would have drowned the entire square. If so, this triumphant parade might not be as beautiful. Finally, this is a triumphant return. Yes, how can it be considered a triumphant return when only the victorious warriors return? The citizens who are waiting and welcoming them are the source of the warrior struggle. Without the welcome and understanding of the citizens of the mist, without the citizens' blissful smiles, what is the meaning of the warrior's sacrifice and return? At this moment, I can finally put down the heavy stone in my heart. If the new citizens are unable to accept the undead knight, what should we do? When that happens, everyone will probably feel terrible. If such a situation were to occur, I'm afraid that it would be impossible to resolve the situation. In reality, even though my words are resolute and I am the first to step through the city gates, my heart has been beating like a drum. But I know that I can't show my fear. Otherwise, those hesitant fellows would definitely desert, and it would be impossible for us to achieve our current success. Even though he is huge and ugly, the shoulders of the abomination Carlos are filled with naughty children. Perhaps the young parents hope to communicate more with this young knight who sacrificed himself at a young age. Or perhaps the citizens of the mist are using their own methods to console this unfortunate young man. Should I be thankful for the obstruction from the Holy Church? If not for their hostility, the hateful dark history wouldn't have been exposed, and we wouldn't have been able to successfully allow the undead knight to be accepted by the citizens. No, I should be thankful to the citizens of the mist. It is because I trust them that I made this bet. In any other country, it is impossible for the living to travel together with the undead. Why don't we organize a commemorative festival and have a small celebration every year to deepen our friendship? I didn't expect that in the future, the famous ghost festival of the Northern Lands would be born. On that day, youngsters would dress up as demons and ghosts and begin a grand ghost parade. Of course, there would often be real ghosts among them. The undead aren't viewed as evil, and this became one of the most important symbols of the Sinless City. Soon, when the news spread, countless people who were discriminated against and minorities began to consider heading to the Northern Lands to take a look. I didn't do anything evil, so why are they chasing after me relentlessly? I've had enough of these days of being a street rat. If even the undead can be accepted, perhaps a half-elf / half-beastman / demon warlock like me can be accepted by the world and live under the sun. While Roland was busy preparing for his future, some people were destined to be unlucky. A few months later, when the news from the northern lands reached the Ottoman Empire, the emperor, who was still energetic despite losing his capital, showed signs of fatigue for the first time. "You will regret it?" That valiant figure, and those words appeared in his dream once more. That pun became the regret of a certain emperor for the rest of his life. He had already found out from the contract that the real name of the princess was Roland. Now that Roland's Valkyrie had appeared in the northern lands, if Dasos still didn't know what he had done wrong, there was no need for him to continue being the esteemed emperor. "Yes, I regret it. I really regret it. Is this retribution? Is this retribution for allowing others to assassinate you? Or have I made a grave mistake from the start?" Every time His Majesty was drunk alone, he would wail and shout such words. At this time, thinking that His Majesty was under too much pressure from the worsening war situation, the attendants at the side would close the door for him and call Lord Hermit and Lord Rosemary. The former was the advisor that His Majesty trusted deeply. Regardless of whether it was war or daily life, he could always make suggestions that satisfied His Majesty and put His Majesty at ease. The latter, on the other hand, was a super beauty that could make people dizzy. Being considerate, she could relieve His Majesty's stress and emotions with just a few words. But this time, it seemed that Lord Hermit was busy with the war, so only Rosemary came. "His Majesty Dasos? Why are you drinking so much again?" "Rosemary? Come, drink with me." "Yes, Your Majesty." It's better to drink less. Alcohol is bad for your health." I didn't expect that you would be so worried about me when she sent you here. Come, let's have a chat." As expected, after a few words, the heartbroken Dasos' mood improved a lot. "Rosemary, you are really a roundworm in my stomach. Military, politics, economics, business, you really know everything." The peerless beauty smiled and didn't reply. On the other side of the continent, at the phylactery with pink bones, countless information and secrets directly entered someone's pocket. The war in the Ottoman Empire has reached a stalemate. The three elemental gods are making a comeback at the same time. The beastmen in the north are getting restless. Looks like I have to make early preparations. Chapter 132. Ding! Congratulations to the host for building a new class advancement facility. Avalanche Defender class advancement unlocked. Aurora Knight class advancement unlocked. Eternal Wind Knight class advancement unlocked. Host, please toss a commoner into the facility. After 2 minutes, a powerful warrior will jump out. Do you think I would say that? Stop dreaming. This is the real world. There is no such thing as a messy class change system that is neither scientific nor magical. You want a powerful warrior? Fine, I'll train and nurture them myself. You want to send troops just by building a barracks? The interstellar war next door is calling for you. All right then, as expected, it wouldn't be so easy to have a powerful troop type. However, the system that was neither scientific nor magical actually retorted that I was unscientific. As expected, it was just as annoying as always. This was already the third day of return celebration. However, not only did Definder celebrations not stop, the celebrations had already expanded to include the entire country. Since that's the case, we might as well hold a nationwide celebration and pardon the world. Food will be provided by the National Treasury. Let the people who have been oppressed for a long time enjoy themselves. This was the judgment that I had made. Although it was obvious that I was trying to win over the hearts of the people, in this time of storm, it was indeed effective in calming the hearts of the people. The celebration was nothing more than food, wine, music, artistic performances, and all kinds of special activities. The square outside the window was filled with endless singing and dancing, and the sound of drums and music shook the heavens. But inside the palace, it had already returned to the busy daily routine. According to your plan, the day of homecoming celebration will last for 5 days, and the food for the celebration will be provided to the other towns. This will use up at least 2 months of rations, and the food supply that we've worked so hard to obtain will have a shortfall in advance. Although there were some kind-hearted people who sponsored them this time, and they earned quite a lot, the expected lack of resources was still a hidden danger. If it wasn't you, I would have stopped the proposal at all costs, and then found a reason to throw the proposer to the border as a coolie. The words of Kelly, the head female official of the royal palace, echoed the common thoughts of the government officials. They, who were used to living a hard life, could not help but wish that they could split a single copper coin and spend it on 2 separate days. How could they tolerate such extravagance and waste? If it wasn't for me suppressing them, I'm afraid that this celebration wouldn't even have been held. Everyone has worked hard, but it's worth it. On one hand, it was to reward the people. Although the harvest season was still dismal, it was not their fault. After a year of hard work, it was time for them to rest for a few days. On the other hand, we have to give the people a new impression that from today onwards, everything will be different. With this as a node, a lot of work will become easier in the future. Morale? Popularity? The will of the people? This seemingly illusory thing will, in a sense, play a crucial and positive role. At the very least, it will fill the stomachs of the people and give them hope for a better future. This is the only thing we can do now. Of course, to truly change this country, he had to do it step by step. I made a whimsical request to the system, and as expected, I received an answer that was even more whimsical than I expected. Every single warrior required several years, or even more than a dozen years of training. You want to send out soldiers just by throwing resources into a barracks? It would be great if this could be done in real life. Then, the 2 most important things right now are still those 2. One is the rebuilding of the main army, and the second is the problem of food. Even though the sparrow was small, it had all the essentials. There were at least 30 officials present for this emergency internal affairs meeting, and from what I had just interacted with, there were quite a few talents among them. The reason why Renee and the Mist royalty were able to last till today was due to these experienced and hard-working administrative talents. A filial son can be seen from a poor family, and a country's difficulties can only reveal a virtuous minister. Should I be thankful for all these years of training? To be able to organize a celebration in a short 10 hours, calculate how much pressure a week celebration would have on the next year's food supply, and then arrange a new base for the army. That bunch of people in Sulphur Mountain City who always said what Lord Saint said is right definitely wouldn't be able to do it. But no matter how skilled an administrative talent is, it still comes from the efficient use of resources. Even the cleverest housewife can't cook without rice. Without anything, even the most skilled administrative talent can't do anything. At this moment, I am not used to the way the meeting is conducted. As a newcomer, not only do I not have an official position, I am even sitting at the main seat to host the internal affairs meeting. Yet, they are acting as though it is only right and proper. The one who is the most uncomfortable in the meeting is me. After all, I am already used to the bunch of unreliable subordinates. In the past, I spent most of the time in the meetings struggling with them, trying my best to bring the topic back to the original point. Now that I am discussing problems with the members of the meeting so seriously, I'm actually not used to it. Looking at the serious faces of the group of middle-aged and elderly officials, constantly taking notes, pondering, and asking questions, I really want to pull Shiwedi, who is still reveling in the square, over and let them see how others work seriously. As for food, there should be a batch of meat in half a month's time. If we prepare our reserves, it should be able to prolong the consumption for a period of time. Kelly immediately comes to a realization. You're talking about that whale? I nod my head. That mountainous narwhal carcass is too much of a waste to be left in the sea. Considering the food supply, I have already sent the Borealis to drag it back. Considering that it is really too big, if it is impossible to drag it back, it is possible to cut it into pieces on the spot and bring it back. Even if a top-tier sea monster is dead, the remaining might will last for a period of time, so there is no need to worry about fishes and prawns finding us so quickly. The whale meat can be used as food, and there seems to be top-tier spices in its body. This is a huge fortune, and it would be a pity to waste it. As for solving the problem of food from the root, I have a plan. Selling off the harvest, this time, should not be a problem to exchange for at least 2 to 3 years of disaster relief rations. Then, we can take our time to think about it. After all, Donglan is a small country. The huge amount of resources that even the Emperor of the Ottoman Empire a mega country, would be an astronomical figure to a small country. It is possible for them to eat for a few years. After asking, the head of the finance department flips through his records and nods his head affirmatively. If we were to sell off those gems and minerals, not to mention 2 years, even 5 years would be enough. I nod my head in satisfaction. At the same time, I think of Dasos's bitter face when I extorted him. Also, I heard from Rosemary that she has already entered the core of the Ottoman Empire. Perhaps there will be opportunities for me to play some tricks in the future. From a maid with a suspicious identity to the upper echelons of power, she even said that she might be able to step into an even higher position. I really wonder how she did it. Although she is still unwilling to tell me the reason why she ascended to the top in a single step, I don't think that she would lie. Other than the fact that her phylactery is still in my hands, the top-tier intelligence on the entire continent that I obtained from her also proves that she has indeed come into contact with the upper echelons of power. It is obviously impossible to just rely on eating from the rich, but at the very least, it should be fine for a few years. I will think of a way to solve the problem of food. Now then, let's talk about the proposal, expanding the army. If it were any other country, the proposal to expand the army would be a life-threatening proposal. The Dove faction and the Hawk faction would definitely fight out. Unless the Emperor exerts pressure on them, it would be a dream to not drag on for 3 to 5 years, or even 10 to 20 years. Strengthening the central army would also have to consider the reactions of the local domain lords. Even if it is passed by a fluke, when the time comes to start building the army, it would be difficult to snatch military positions and authority. But for Donglan, who has struggled in the northern lands for so long, this is practically a dream. The main reason why they didn't expand the army previously was because they couldn't afford to support it. Regardless of whether it is to deal with future wars or to protect the citizens from the winter beast stampede in the northern lands, there is no amount of powerful armies. So, the first thing I have to do is to imitate the mist country structure of the past. With my knights as the core, I will rebuild the various armies. Their original names, flags, and equipment will all be the same. If I have the help of the veterans, I should be able to take shape within 10 years. Looking around, I saw everyone nodding their heads in agreement and excitement in their eyes. The people of the Mist Country had already suffered enough from a lack of military strength. As long as the resources keep up, they would be able to build a truly powerful army. This was a dream come true. Actually, the will of the youngsters to protect their country has always been strong. The number of people who volunteered to join the army has always exceeded the capacity of our logistics. Now, as long as the logistics can keep up, coupled with the fact that we have legendary tier troops to attract new recruits, there shouldn't be a problem with the supply of soldiers. Then the recruitment will begin after this celebration ends. If you don't have sufficient equipment, then use the simple wooden sword and wooden spear for training. Let's set up the venue first before we talk about anything else. Start from actual combat and focus on training. However, there were some who understood the hidden meaning behind my words and raised their doubts. Future wars? Does your highness think that there will be another war? All of you should have heard that a new eternal sacred war is about to begin. On the Ottoman side, the war between the water elementals and the sea folk is just the vanguard. That isn't the only place that isn't peaceful. At the mention of the eternal sacred war, everyone's face darkened. Expanding the army was one thing, but fighting a war was another. It had only been a few days of peace. Why did it have to come again? Not long ago, I received confidential intelligence that the black-winged people in the south and the wind elemental god are working together. Their cloud fleet is currently heading west, looting all the cities and towns that pass by. There were even 2 capitals of intermediate kingdoms that suffered a calamity. As for the north, at the mention of the north, as expected, everyone's spirits were lifted. After all, this was the northern end of the human world. Their lives were at stake here, so no matter what, they had to be extra careful. I sighed helplessly in my heart. As expected, the people of the mist were plagued with disasters. A year ago, they had just defeated the Beastman tribes, and after a few days of peace, trouble came again. In the north, there seems to be a tribe that has received the support of the earth elemental god and has suddenly become stronger. That fellow has proclaimed himself as the Khan of the beastmen. They should be swallowing each other through internal strife. Going by tradition, it is only a matter of time before the main army invades the south. That is impossible. Ah, Your Highness, I am not saying that you are lying, but this is a devastating disaster. Your Highness, are you sure about your source of information? Your Highness, which Beastman tribe is it? Is it the Highland Beastmen or the Plains Beastmen? Have the other northern countries received the news? As expected, the moment this heavy bomb was dropped, the entire conference room became noisy. The Beastmen of the North were divided into two regions. The Highland Beastmen were distributed along the Orzon mountain range. The terrain there was complicated, and more than 70% of the Beastmen lived there. On the other hand, the Highland Plains had a smaller number of Beastmen, but they were densely packed, so the threat they posed was greater. If it was the Beastmen tribes from the Highlands, there would at least be a few countries acting as a barrier. However, if it was the Plains Beastmen, there was a border between Donglan and them. Due to historical reasons, that border of several dozen kilometers had never been peaceful. Of course, this was still considered good. If it was the border of the Mist Country in the past, the two sides would be directly connected to each other, and the pressure would be even greater. In the past 200 years, the Highland Kingdom of Suya, which had the bloodline of the barbarians, rose to power. Together with the neighboring Rhodes Kingdom, they forcefully split the Beastmen plains into two, thus alleviating the pressure. By the way, these two countries were the only two among the 7 northern countries that had a good relationship with the Donglan Principality. Other than the fact that they were viewed as barbarian countries, their territories were newly developed lands of other races, and they didn't occupy the original territory of the Mist Country. Thus, they didn't have this complicated history with each other, which was the main reason why they had a good relationship with each other. As for the other countries of the 7 northern countries, most of them were lords who came from the south, and they might even be relatives of the 17 countries that were destroyed. How could they have a good relationship with each other? At the very least, unless it was absolutely necessary, merchants wouldn't be willing to come to this barbarian country. There are 3 countries in the north where the natives of the northern lands are the main inhabitants. There's also an ancient country called Phoenix Nest. The Rhodes Kingdom is located on both sides of the border, and its political stance is slightly leaning towards the north, but its royal family is from the south. The 4 countries in the south. Among them, the Sluir Kingdom is a product of the Mist Kingdom split, and they emphasize that they are the true ruler of the Mist Kingdom, and a bunch of small autonomous regions that can't even be considered as countries. This is the chaotic situation in the northern lands. The entire Northlands were viewed as barbarians by the major human countries, and there were endless conflicts between the various countries in the Northlands, which made this bitter and cold land truly a land of exiles and borders for humans. At the very least, many of the so-called autonomous lands were free lands formed by bandits and wanted criminals. This information was actually provided by the Kingdom of the Elves, so it should be reliable. It said that they've already informed most of the human kingdoms. It's the Highland Beastmen. I think it's called the Blood Axe tribe. Tui, those long-eared people can't wait for us to fight to the death with the barbarians, but we're still being ostracized. Sluir is going to be out of luck. Serves that bastard traitor right. It's the same for the Kisomi Duchy. The Blood Axe tribe doesn't seem to be far from them. But I'm afraid that the Rhodes Kingdom will be implicated. There is a lot of discussion, and at this point, it was time for the meeting to come to a final conclusion. Don't be too happy yet. Although we won't be the first to bear the brunt, the possibility of being implicated is not low. Once the border is breached, we will still have to face the Beastmen tribe, so we need to prepare for a real battle. Therefore, I have a suggestion. This year, we will restart the glory of our past, the winter hunt. The meeting room was still bustling with activity, but I was resting at the side of the corridor. Even though it was already nighttime, the square not far away was still noisy. The bonfire had already been lit, and the vulgar yet lively music made me smile from the bottom of my heart. I also saw the bone dragon that was twisting its waist and dancing in a strange manner. It seemed like they were planning to cause a ruckus through the night. All the tasks that could be assigned had already been assigned, so I didn't have to worry about the rest. The preparations for the recruitment of soldiers and the homecoming day celebration were going smoothly. I didn't have to worry too much about it, and the only point of contention was still the winter hunt that I had proposed last. Only the people of the northern lands knew that the beasts in winter and the beasts in summer were two completely different concepts. The beasts that were driven crazy by hunger were bloodthirsty and fearless of any enemies. If they were to go crazy from hunger, they could just dig a ditch to protect the city, and they would use their flesh and blood to fill it up. The mutated beasts and super beasts in the snowy mountains were not uncommon. Once they went berserk, they would definitely be extremely terrifying enemies. Spring and autumn in the northern lands were extremely short. Spring, summer, and autumn only added up to 5 months. After 30 days, the northern lands would be covered in snow and ice, and the winter season would descend once again. In previous years, in order to deal with the beast hordes, fortifying the walls and clearing the fields would be the best solution. If the beast hordes formed a beast tide, it would be a helpless move to move the residents of the small villages and towns to the big cities. After all, not everything could be brought along. When the villagers returned to their hometown in spring, they would definitely see their homes in ruins. On the other hand, large migrations were often extremely dangerous. If they happened to meet a beast hordes that had set off ahead of time in the wild, ferocious beasts that set off on their own would probably be delivering themselves to their doorstep. However, it was even more unrealistic for the villagers to give up their homes, livestock, and farmlands right from the start. If they were to give up once a year, they wouldn't be able to survive. Furthermore, the living space around the big cities was limited, and the food supply was even more limited. Obviously, the above countermeasures were both passive and problematic. On the other hand, the winter hunt that I suggested, not only would we be able to obtain a large amount of meat and beast specialties, we would also be able to use our mobile forces to fight against the beast hordes. At the same time, we would be able to reduce the pressure on the cities and boost the morale of the citizens and the army. There were many benefits to it. Of course, everyone knew of these benefits, but the reason why they hadn't implemented it all this while was because of the fundamental problem of strength. Using fortifications in the cities to deal with the beast hordes that could only fight a war of attrition, and using them to deal with the bloodthirsty and cunning beast hordes in the wild, were two completely different concepts. The reason why my suggestion was rejected by everyone was due to their lack of understanding and confidence in the military strength of the country. How can we be considered a strong army without going through the trials of battle? No matter what, the frenzied beastmen would be easier to deal with than the brainless beast hordes. Even if we were worried about those young lads, the new soldiers would be able to grow swiftly with the guidance of the veterans. An army that has never seen blood, no matter how well equipped they are, can only be considered as security guards. I didn't argue with them. After all, words were useless. In the end, it would still depend on strength to convince them. In any case, the army was already in my hands, so I should just prepare for it. Right, my current identity was rather awkward. After all, I was the prince of the Mist Country. Even though the royal family of this country claimed to be my descendant and had received the recognition of the world, from a legal perspective, I should be considered as a member of the royal family. However, logically speaking, I should be considered as an emperor who had already retired from the throne. However, I had never been an emperor, and I wasn't dead either. How did I become an emperor just like that? This relationship was so messed up that even the most formidable heraldry expert, the study of noble bloodlines and family emblems, wouldn't be able to sort out this mess. As for the military power that I currently held, it was under the identity of Princess Renee's guardian knight. That's right, guardian knight, and not a knight of military merit. After all, not too long ago, in order to use the Roland Sacred Sword to prove my identity, I could only ask Renee to help me confer the title of knight in name only. In the end, she conferred me the title of guardian knight right at the city gates of Definder. We're about to enter the city, so how can we have the time to look for the Senate to confirm your noble title and territory? In any case, There are many precedents of older brothers and fathers serving as the guardian knight of a single princess. Big Brother Roland is just like my big brother, so you can just make do with the title guardian knight. As she said this, Renee's face flushed red. It was apparent that she was a little embarrassed. However, the identity of guardian knight was indeed very convenient. Using the identity of Renee's representative to deal with matters, it also avoided a lot of awkwardness. At that time, I felt that this was a good idea and even praised Renee a few words. Her adaptability isn't bad, and this lass is quite quick-witted. That's more like my descendant. Even though I was praising her from the bottom of my heart, for some reason, the moment I said these words, Kelly and Renee's faces darkened. There were even people from the undead army behind us who laughed out loud. All right, back to the main topic. At the very least, this identity of Renee's representative gave me, who didn't have an official position, some confidence when I called for an administrative meeting. In reality, there were many things that weren't convenient to talk about during the meeting, but I had already begun to deal with them. Since the symbol of royal authority, the Roland sacred sword, has reappeared in the world, Donlon should be able to discuss the legitimacy and merger of the Mist Country with the other smaller countries. There's also the Frigid Maw altar in the middle of the snowy mountains. Who knows how many new Frigid Maw have been born over the past 300 years. It's about time for a true Aurora Knight to be born. These two matters can only be accomplished by me personally. Troublesome matters came one after another. At this moment, I missed Eliza immensely. With her around, I could be at ease and leave all the work to her. Why don't I find some time to chat with her? System notice. Your death-seeking has broken through the heavens. Cough, this time, I really didn't come out to criticize you for courting death. Instead, I have another daily quest. Please accept it. Ding. Daily quest. Today's unlucky fellow. Please punish at least 3 villains who have committed evil deeds. Depending on the identity of the person being punished, you will be rewarded with 1 to 100 fate points. There is no upper limit. However, if you fail, 1,000 fate points will be deducted. You don't need to do daily quests just because you have so many fate points recently that you aren't afraid of deducting it. If you still fail this daily quest, 10,000 fate points will be deducted the next time. Looking at this daily quest, I was momentarily stunned. Doing evil doesn't necessarily mean that it's illegal. If it's illegal, it's more likely that it's evil. In the past, it would be easy to find any villains to punish. I just have to find a criminal in the prison. However, due to the Homecoming Day celebration, the amnesty order was just passed down. Where am I supposed to find a criminal? If I were to directly go and find a criminal right now, the gods' notice in the Sinless Land would seem to be right beside my ears. Even the most deranged villains would fear the might of the gods and restrain themselves for a period of time. Looks like I can only admit that I'm unlucky. The darn system must be pissed at me and wants to mess with me. 1,000 fate points it is, but I really need to be careful of the 10,000 fate points tomorrow. Puffed. The scene in front of me caused me to spit out my tea. I rubbed my eyes and wondered if I was hallucinating. It was a group of men running. Among them, there were quite a few familiar figures. The one leading them was that tall and mighty Minotaur. Returning to nature and walking with the wind. This is the true nature of us Minotaurs. My real name isn't important. Please call me the Son of Wind. Come, my friends, please join us in this beautiful run of riding the wind. As I expected, there were quite a few guards chasing behind this group of bastards. Other than wooden sticks, they were also brandishing messy clothes and pants. Lord, at least wear your underwear. Underwear, underwear. The shouts of the city guards echoed in the streets. My face immediately turned green. Son of Wind, your head. Is it because this is the underground world? How many Minotaurs are there in the entire Definder? Isn't it obvious from the start? The Supreme Judge is leading the team to run naked. How are the judges of the Church of Law going to conduct themselves tomorrow? I thought that you would be able to hold it in for a few days. You can't take it anymore? My family is unlucky. Thus, I picked up the Silver Avenger without hesitation. I get it now. So the system isn't pissed at me, but at that stupid Minotaur. Fine, I'll clean up my family today. Ding, you guessed it right. but there's no reward. The system continued to prompt. Think about it. Why does the quest require at least 3 people? Yes, due to the miracle of the sinless city, those local criminals will have to restrain themselves for a period of time. However, have you forgotten that there is still a group of weirdos who are experts in guessing the boundaries of the law? Do you want to become the fireworks expert that everyone envies? Do you want to comprehend the profound meaning of the underground world's sacrificial rites? Safe, reliable, and dazzling. The safety brand fireworks are on sale. You deserve it. All right, the villains who sold dangerous goods and fake goods have appeared. It's time for us to settle our grudges. I want to avenge my lover number 38. Leaning against the wall with a bow in hand, a Draken hunter with the demeanor of an expert stands tall. Don't think that I will be afraid of you just because you advanced to legend. A true hunter will never fear the strength of their prey. That will only make us happier. Your weakness has long been exposed to me. The next moment will be the day of your death. This is an old dwarf hunter. Although he looks ordinary, the silver gleaming hunting rifle in his hand is obviously not an ordinary weapon. At a stall on the side, a gnome is shouting with all his might. The grudges from 30 years ago have been settled in a single night. A peerless battle is about to begin. Kabbalah Gambling House is currently accepting all kinds of bets. If you bet that the Legend Draken will win, the payout is 1-2. If you bet that the Ace Archer will win, the payout is 1-3. If you bet that both sides will perish together, the payout is 1-10. If you bet that both sides will settle the grudges with a smile, the payout is 1-100. All right then, there were gambling scams and private brawls. Hearing all this, I knew what I had to do. Before the underground world and the Church of Law's reputation were thrown into the gutter by these bastards, I had to hurry up and clean up the mess. Can I bet that due to some special reason, the duel has been stopped? Of course you can. The payout is 1-7. However, the ending of the grudges with a smile isn't included. The moment the gleeful Kabbalah raises his head and sees me, his smiling face turns into a crying face. Aren't you supposed to be in a meeting? Instead, I throw a bag of gold coins at his head. Keep it well. After I settle this bunch of bastards, I will ask you for your reward. All right. What followed after was a delightful night of suppression. After running until I was out of breath, I immediately placed rebuilding the town's security as the most important task at hand. In the end, not only did I complete the daily mission on time, I even accumulated more than 700 points. Of course, the nude running of the highest bishop is destined to be a stain on the Church of Law. However, in the future history, this is how this dark history will be recorded. AD 1897, during the homecoming celebration, due to his heartfelt joy for the knight who returned home, the highest bishop, Shueti, drank too much during the celebration. After that, he lost his virtue. Although he didn't violate any laws, in order to punish himself, he hung himself on the highest flagpole in the palace for 3 days and 3 nights. The people of the world sighed at his noble virtue of upholding justice and being strict with himself. They named him as the just hangman. Hanging him on the flagpole became the path of cultivation for every judge when they were at a loss. In order to commemorate this legendary story, the homecoming sun breeze became a traditional custom. Of course, most of the participants would still wear underwear. Chapter 133, AD 1897, the Summer of the Griffin. Facing the worsening situation of the country, in order to deal with the impending eternal holy war, the Night Princess Renee, Qin Mist of the Donglan Principality, made up her mind to retrieve the lost glory of the Mist Country. She worked hard and went through many trials before finally obtaining the recognition of her ancestor, the Valkyrie Roland Mist. Following the return of the undead army, marked by the homecoming celebration and the first winter hunting season in 300 years, history turned over a new page, and the Northern Wolf King who ruled over the North finally rose once more. This is a review from a certain historical journal many years later. Looking at it from here, it seems rather normal. Of course, to the majority of the audience, this isn't the main point from the very start. Princess Renee, who remained unmarried for her entire life, actually allowed her ancestor, Roland, to become the guardian knight. This is the hot topic of countless poems and dramas in the future. Although there aren't any detailed historical records left behind, considering the chaotic family relationships of the Northlanders and the fact that Princess Renee remained unmarried for her entire life, we can guess that there is some truth to this creation. As for the rumor that Princess Renee's sexual orientation is a little strange, it should just be a cover to deceive the public. The above is an excerpt from Exploring the Historical Archetypes of the 10 Great Classical Love Operas, compiled by a publishing house under the cultural department of the Einlok Empire. Note: this book is viewed as a forbidden book by the Donglan Empire and the other northern countries. The author was once hunted down by the people of Donglan. If he were to bring this book into the northern lands and get ganged up on, he would be asking for it. The publishing house isn't responsible for it. All right, I won't pursue the matter of this publishing house that courted death to the extreme in the future. I won't even consider the trouble that this guardian knight would cause in the future either. At the very least, for the time being, he has resolved the awkward problem of my character's position and prevented the strange situation of having two cores in Donglan. After all, the Eastlan Principality was currently rebuilding its various armies, and all the army commanders were undead knight. From an outsider's point of view, it was as if I had descended from the sky and taken control of a new army. Naturally, it would feel like I was just a figurehead, so it was best to avoid certain things. Most of the army divisions were formed very smoothly. Just as they revealed their intentions to expand the army, the Ministry of War and the recruitment points were filled to the brim. Although due to the backwardness of the industry, there was no need to think about weapons and equipment. At least there were enough people, and training could begin. Naturally, there were also those who were unlucky. Some armies met with trouble right from the start, and it was a huge problem that could not be solved in a short period of time. As Mohau Mastu, there's a full set of training methods, and it's even an improved version. The people who signed up are all smart kids that were carefully selected, and they're all good seedlings. Those undead rangers also showed off their dog training skills, and the dozen or so skeleton dogs surrounded and ambushed them, giving them the taste of a battlefield. But the problem is, the Tuck fighting dog is extinct? How is that possible? All right, I really didn't expect this problem. The Tuck fighting dog is a large fighting dog unique to the northern lands. They are at least half the height of a human, and their snow-white fur is extremely resistant to the cold. They have sharp teeth and a keen sense of smell, and they are naturally aggressive and loyal. They are the best companions of the Asmu Houndmaster, and after training, they even dare to fight with lions. Only then did we realize that the destruction of the country back then was too great of a loss, and all of the domesticated fighting dogs were lost. After that, there were consecutive natural disasters, and even humans couldn't eat their fill, let alone the dogs. Those that didn't run into the mountains to become wild dogs were basically eaten up by the refugees. At the very least, there isn't a single fighting dog left in Definder. After hesitating for a moment, I finally asked, since the fighting dogs are extinct, why don't we try changing into an Asmu Houndmaster? The northern lands might not have much, but there are definitely plenty of wolves. It seems that the winter wolves are quite strong as well. They seem to be of the canine family, so there shouldn't be much of a difference. All right, the moment these words came out of my mouth, the undead rangers looked at me as though I was an alien. Your Highness, wolves and dogs are fundamentally different species, and the wild nature of wolves is hard to tame. Furthermore, winter wolves are magic beasts, so no matter how you look at it, they're completely different from ordinary wolves. My lips moved a little, but I didn't say anything. Should I go and talk to them about Darwin's theory of evolution? Furthermore, who knows how the dogs and wolves in the other world evolved? They might really be a different species, and it would be even more embarrassing if I were to get it wrong. Crossing species is indeed a difficult problem, but speaking of this, when I mentioned crossing species, I suddenly thought of a certain person. The reason why you still like humans is because you haven't met a life that you truly love. Species? That has never been a problem. The elder brother of a certain true love brother and sister duo. Thus, I try to bring up this topic. Even if it sounds inconceivable, we can still give it a try. You guys should go and look for the hunter named Bayfoam. Herald. He is the legendary human who prisoner Bayfoam, crime Bayfoam, judgment Bayfoam. No, don't look at me like that. I haven't given up on my treatment, and I didn't take any medicine today either. Trust me, you guys should go and look for him first to give a try. The Rangers left doubtfully. I was secretly glad that I managed to fool them, and I forgot about the matter. I didn't expect that after 2 months, the Rangers would rush into my office and tell me a piece of shocking good news. What? That fellow actually succeeded in taming a winter wolf. Herald Polar Wolf Tamer? What does this name count for? Right, how did he succeed? Why is everyone silent? All right, I know that I shouldn't ask, but please don't tell me, and don't spread it out. If the Herald Polar Wolf Tamer could be considered to have found a replacement by chance, there were a few armies that, due to various reasons, were unable to be formed. Due to the existence of the Dragon Knight Timir, the living signboard of the Black Griffin Aerial Squadron, the registration for this meritorious squadron was very enthusiastic. However, the registration was closed after a day, and Timir didn't accept a single person. The reason? Without powerful aerial mounts, how could an aerial squadron be formed? From the name of the Black Griffin Aerial Squadron, it can be seen that the Mist Kingdom's aerial cavalry was no different from the other human empires in the past. They still relied on griffins as their main force. However, the current Dawnlon couldn't afford to rear expensive griffins. Furthermore, with the outbreak of the Holy War, it was clear that it was difficult to purchase such military supplies, seeing that his brothers had already formed an army while he was still a lone commander. How could Timir not be anxious? The suggestion to transfer the Aurora Knight and the high-tier Headless Knight into the aerial squadron is rejected. Timir, don't look so bitter. I will get Bastion to capture a bunch of Mandicores and send them over. They are much stronger than Griffins. What? That's 2 different matters? Mandicores are impossible to tame? Believe me, you might need a Bayfoam. What? Group tactics can only be used in a group of Griffins? All right, if you insist on Griffins, I remember that Little Red is rearing a flock of them. It is possible to borrow a few dozen of them. However, if it is 100 of them, even if she is willing to give them to us, we won't be able to afford it. Just like how the energy consumption of a mechanical flying unit is 100 times that of a chariot, in order to break free from the shackles of gravity, a large amount of energy must be expended. In the end, flying units are generally huge energy consumers. This is the case for machines, magic creatures, and even living birds of prey. The humans' griffins and giant eagles are considered good, but they still require a large amount of meat for every meal. A meal of 400 to 500 griffins is roughly enough to feed 10,000 people. Even the head of finance and logistics would faint if he were to do so. However, if the griffins aren't in a flock, they wouldn't be of much use. All right, at most 30 of them. They can only be used as scouts. We really can't afford to rear any more of them. So be it. At least it is better than a lone commander. After Timir sighed and left, a new problem came. This time, the ones who came were Fandirk and Lonnie. They were once outstanding users of Holy Light. After being converted into undead creatures, the 2 of them became outstanding Death Knight. However, the army that they formed met with an even bigger problem. Originally, their Dawnhammer army was a Holy Light army with Holy Knight and Battle Priests as the core. However, not to mention Dawnlon's dissatisfaction with the Holy Church, this would definitely slow down the progress of the recruitment process. Furthermore, the fact that the leader and vice leader were unable to use Holy Light was the biggest problem. A Death Knight who was unable to use Holy Light was teaching Holy Light and Holy Knight battle techniques. This was a completely embarrassing situation. Furthermore, if an undead were to stay among a large group of Holy Light users, it was possible that they would be purified by the Holy Light for no reason one day. This was something that they had to guard against. Why don't we try forming a Black Warrior or Black Knight army? Or perhaps we should form a Death Knight army and teach those kids the battle techniques of Death Knight in advance. In the end, the fallen Holy Knight army and Death Knight army fell through. After all, the requirements for a job were too ridiculous. There was not a single living knight who would take the initiative to change into a death knight. As for the eternal Wind Knight army, Slants, who was in the midst of forming a light knight army, the content of our discussion could be roughly described with 11 words. Money? Horses? Equipment? No money. No horses. No equipment. A knight was a money-burning job, and a knight army was even more so. How strong the logistics of a country was in order to support a strong knight army. Hearing my reply, the cool Slants turned around and left. Perhaps he knew from the start that he wouldn't be able to get it. However, how could he be satisfied if he didn't try? Initially, I thought that it would be easy to recruit soldiers to form a new army. However, when I really sat in this position, a myriad of miscellaneous matters came crashing down on me. Only then did I realize that I was too naive. I could still think of ways to overcome the flaws in the front, but there were some areas where I was at a dead end. Among them, the most difficult one was that Donlan's industrial standards were lagging behind this era. This lag was in all aspects. Smithing, iron, mining, engineering, alchemy, all of them were still at the level of 100 to 200 years ago. Even if there were wise rulers who tried to work hard in this area, putting aside the hostility and blockade of the mainstream human society, even if others were willing to sell, Donlan wouldn't be able to afford it. The old smithing furnaces were still the models from 2 centuries ago. All of the alchemy and engineering shops were selling low-end, standardized products. After losing the last rich mining area 20 years ago, the mining industry declined rapidly. Now it was as if there was nothing left. In this world, if one wanted to forge a good sword, they would first need a miner to gather a sufficient amount of iron ore. Then, the iron ore would be processed into steel ingots and iron ingots before being handed over to a blacksmith to forge. If one came across a high-quality sword, they would even hire an enchanter or alchemist to carve magic runes and enchant them. With Donlan's current industrial standards, not to mention analyzing the new weapons obtained from the Ottoman Empire, it would be difficult for them to even repair the damaged equipment in the armory, not to mention providing the new army with quality equipment. Even a low-quality iron sword required countless processes, not to mention the superior equipment of the Ace Knight Order. Donlan fell into a strange situation where they had blueprints but no craftsmen, technology but no equipment, templates but no raw materials. This was the difference between them. Fortunately, I had dug up quite a number of talents from the Ottoman Empire. There were talents from all walks of life, but to let them live and work in peace and to truly assimilate into the bloodline of this country, it would require a large amount of time. Currently, what we lacked the most was time. Boom! Boom! From afar, the sound of an explosion reverberates through the clouds. The roof beams that were sent flying across the sky, spiraling into the distance. However, the citizens were already used to it. After all, such explosions were a daily routine. Previously, the citizens couldn't understand why I had designated a separate area for the specialists of various professions to do their research. However, after seeing the daily explosions here and there, they finally understood my painstaking efforts back then. But this time, after the explosion, they saw a familiar figure. It was the miracle alchemist Olivia, whose entire body was emitting smoke. At this moment, even though she was in a sorry state, her face was filled with excitement. Ever since she became Ingo's apprentice, the number of explosions that Olivia made up half of the entire research area. Every day, she would do it at least 3 times, sometimes even 10 times. Even so, she didn't die from it. Perhaps this is the origin of the name Miracle. While I was criticizing her in my heart, Olivia smiled happily when she saw me. Your Highness, I have made some progress in the research that you wanted me to do. Just as you said, it might be able to change this world.